Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday, March 20th regular meeting of council. We had a earlier session in camera for some training and discussing the award of merit recipients for 2023. And we're now rising out of that in camera. But before I do that, I need to read you my little spiel here. So I'd like to welcome everybody and do our traditional land acknowledgement that the town of Midland recognizes is located on land, which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people, now known as the Chippewa Tri-Council, comprised of Beausoleil First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgina Island First Nation. The territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5 and Treaty 16 and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. The town of Midland recognizes it's located on land which is traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the historic homelands of the Métis, and that our town is home to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. I also like to deliver the following safety message. Should the fire alarm activate, please exit the room in an orderly fashion and proceed to the evacuation assembly area, which is located in the upper parking lot. You may exit through the main entrance, the glass doors, make an immediate left and proceed out the front doors or through the secondary exit. Right back here, up the stairs, check the door for heat before opening. And if it's safe, exit onto the second floor, turn right and proceed out the door in front of you. Washrooms are located on the second floor to the left of the seating area, and elevators just outside the main entrance. As Midland is a respectful workplace policy, anyone exhibiting violent or harassing behavior will be asked to leave. For anyone requiring a hearing assist device, please advise the clerk and she will arrange with our IT staff to provide you with the device. Council meetings are recorded via Zoom and are posted on the town's YouTube site. The meetings are also broadcast on Rogers TV Midland Channel 53. With that, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection before we kick off the agenda tonight. Thank you, Council. Just before we get in here to our motions from the closed meeting, are there any declarations of conflict of interest relating to the open agenda items this evening?
Yes, Your Worship, I have a conflict on report CSR 2024-29, the composite fees and charges by law to deal with the parking issues. I will declare a conflict on that item one in that report.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. The requisite paperwork you'll file with the clerk.
I will.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I got a motion here moved by Councillor East, seconded by Councillor Meredith. The council receives information, the verbal presentation provided by the clerk at its regular meeting of council, closed session held today, March 20th, 2024, with respect to council vacancy, the interview questions, and voting process training. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next, moved by Councillor Deputy Mayor Prost, seconded by Councillor East, that further to the discussion held during our closed meeting of council March 20th, 2024 regarding the 2023 award of merit recipients, council herein confirms its direction to staff on how to proceed. Also known as we picked at least one. So stay tuned. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, moved by Councillor Meredith, seconded by Councillor McDonald, the contents of the regular council with closed session agenda for March 20th, 24 be approved. All those in favor? Carried. Next, moved by Councillor Ball, seconded by Councillor East, that the items and related recommendations contained within the February 28th, 2024 consent agenda as consent items, having been considered by council, be adopted with the exception of the following three which were pulled. Item 10.4.1 CSR 2024-28, remuneration and expenses paid to members of council and local boards, 2023. Item 10.4.2 CSR 2024-29, 2024 composite fees and charges bylaw. And item 10.4.5 CSR 2024-35, the MLE or Municipal Law Enforcement 2023 year-end update, which will be considered under section 17, reports and other items withdrawn from the consent agenda for council's consideration, which includes presentations by consultants regarding a report under consideration. Council, any commentary on the items that are about to be approved under the consent agenda before we do so? Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. On 10.4.4, the condominium on Bomb Beach Road, it had a in the report I'm trying to blow it up here. It had an expiry date at the end of the report. It had an expiry date of 2028. Is that expiry date when the project needs to be done, or is that when the project needs to be filed for the start of the project, like prior to 2028? I think it's at the end of that report. Trying to pull it up,
Mr. Ferguson,
but I'm
got
blank.
any input you can give while Council Emeritus is pulling up the report?
Yeah, thank you through your worship. So every plan of subdivision, when it's given a draft plan approval, including condominiums, is given a date that they have to satisfy all those conditions. That's registration. So it's not uncommon that if they do get close to that 2028 date and they haven't satisfied all the conditions, that they would apply for what's called a draft plan extension. So there is an end date there that they'd have to have it registered, not built.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor McDonald.
Thank you. I did submit the question of the clearances that are required, number 10, and the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board was listed, and I wondered why.
Tag, you're it, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you, worship. So the conditions that are placed in there from the school board are wording and conditions that they have provided directly to us. So before they can register, they will have to get clearance from the school boards and utility provider saying that those individuals are satisfied that the conditions of approval have been met.
I'll take your word for it. I thought maybe it would have been the transportation consortium that would have to be listed.
Okay, so I guess not, or maybe they communicate with them through the board. Any other questions about the consent agenda items before we pass them? Going once, going twice. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? And it is carried. Moving right along. Moved by Councilor McDonald, seconded by Councilor Ball, the council resolve into committee of the whole. All those in favor? It is carried. Deputy Mayor, take it away.
Sorry about that. Okay, so committee of the whole, number 12, public meeting and hearing, there are none. 13, presentations, there are none. 14, integrity commissioner recommendation report, there are none. 15, deputations and petitions, there are none. 16, committee local board delegation or memo, there were none. 17, reports and other items withdrawn from the consent agenda for council's consideration include presentations by consultants regarding a report under consideration. So 17.1, CSR 2024 outdoor patio and municipal property usage. Council reviewed staff report CSR 2024 and the recommendations contained therein, and the following motion was presented. Thank you. 1, that the outdoor patio and municipal property usage. Oh, sorry, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Emeritus and Councillor Ball. That staff report CSR 2024 outdoor patio and municipal property usage dated March 20th, 2024 be received, and 1, that the outdoor patio and municipal property usage bylaw as attached and be approved, and 2, that a permit fee of $50 for town sidewalk usage be approved, and 3, that town's current fees and charges bylaw be amended to include the proposed sidewalk fee. I open the floor for any discussion. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Who pulled this one? Would they like to speak to it? Counselor Emeritus?
I think Madam Clerk had a question here.
I was just going to mention it, the report wasn't pulled. The first 3 reports were placed under that section prior to the agenda being published.
All those in favor? Or you do want discussion? Okay, Counselor Emeritus?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. Wanted to comment on the, so the outdoor, the patio on town property. This was a pilot project during COVID, as I understand, and now it's basically, there's been no ramifications to it, I guess, or any add-ons, but the problem that I have that that I'm seeing downtown is that when you apply for a patio permit of $500, last year it's up to $525 now, but that permit allows you to take up more than one parking spot for your patio. So I'm proposing an amendment to this for a fee of $500 for each patio or each parking spot your patio is taking up. The problem is that you're where the bollards are situated, and when the bollards get extended into the parking area, it's taking up maybe a third or sometimes a half of another parking spot. So the patio is technically has room for they're seeing larger tables in the patio where instead of bistro tables, but the one patio spot should be able to handle your outdoor patio. And then there's businesses that that have limited parking in front of their retail shops because the parking or the patio is taking up three spots. So if they want 3 spots, then they should be charged for 3 spots. And I'm not against outdoor patios at all, but there has to be a balance between outdoor patios, and retail parking for the other businesses on the block. So if we could limit the patios to maximum of 2 spaces taken up, and again, the bollards aren't placed in strategically in front of each business, right? So so when you're taking up you get the point I'm making. So with that, I'd like to make an amendment. So for each patio, each parking spot you're taking up, it's an additional $500. I also want to retract the fee back to $500 instead of the $525. And also on the municipal sidewalk, the $50 fee for putting product, I guess, outside the businesses. I understand that it's an administration fee to have an application for an additional payee on the business for the town. So, but this has been going on for years without a fee. So I don't see why now there should be a $50 fee for that purpose. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Through you, your worship, to this, the patio program fees are not part of the staff report, so perhaps Madam CFO could address the issue of the fees, because that is included in the fees and charges bylaw. But I'll leave that. Certainly we could, make those amendments if necessary, but that would be part of the fees and charges bylaw that a little later in the program. The issue about the fee for the sidewalk, that wasn't something that we introduced last year when we looked at the fees or the addition of the sidewalk usage. It's simply a charge for not just the administration. The town is taking on the liability or a portion of the liability. It's town property. So we could have issues later if there is, say, a trip and fall, or if somebody has issues with some of the things placed on the town sidewalks that we may have to deal with later, which is another reason why we're asking for the of insurance. But once again, the charge is, in the hands of council.
Counselor Ball?
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was the point of them adding Town of Midland onto their policy, and that they had to include their policy to have a higher insurance so that their insurance would cover anything like that. So we weren't as liable for that. And I think I agree with Councillor Meredith. Our downtown, like I've mentioned this several times with the EDCNS beautification comparison to other municipalities and ours is extremely lacking. And the last thing I want to do is put a fee towards people to decrease their participation in beautifying downtown. I think if anything, we should be encouraging how to help downtown businesses make downtown look more beautiful, look more enticing for tourism. And I think that adding a fee onto that limits that and actually discourages it. So I would be against that fee as well.
Counselor East?
Your worship, Deputy Mayor. I would support what Bill's proposing. I'm downtown, so I see what's happening with the parking. I really do enjoy the outside eating areas. The only problem is that when we have limited parking as it is, and the parking isn't marked well as it is, there's really no way for parking for residents to understand how to park their cars because there's no lines. So the thing is, when you have like a restaurant, which does good for drawing clients to downtown, but it also creates a situation where it makes it harder to find parking. With retail, you have to keep it easy and simple and positive shopping. So the thing is, with the restaurants taking up, say, 3 parking spots, they're limiting other parking for other stores, which also limits the possibility for revenue and customer to go into their stores. So I would fully agree with charging per spot that the restaurants are taking up, because not only is it affecting other store owners, but it's also affecting our revenue that we're drawing in from, well, I guess we don't have paid parking anymore, but it would have affected it. I can personally speak to the fact that, if they're taking up 3 spots, though, they should be paying for those 3 spots. Because if not, they're taking away parking from other storefronts.
Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. I can understand the sentiment about the per spot, because the spots, of course, don't line up. They're not lining up exactly with the building's size. And right now, I think the expectation is if a building or a restaurant, for example, maybe owns 2 buildings and put them together, that they would extend their sidewalk from one edge of their building to the other part, which could consume potentially 2.5 parking spots. So I can see the merit in either if we want to use parking spots as the measurement, or maybe we use square footage, which, is a little less ambiguous then. We have a square footage fee, and, people, will use space and they will pay for that square footage fee. And then it could be as big or as small as they're willing to pay. That might be easier to define than the parking spots, which are a little weird and ambiguous because they don't line up perfectly. So that might be a challenge to staff to come up with a square footage fee, and then we can have a max, so somebody couldn't potentially buy the whole street. You know what I mean? Have a parking lot from one block to another. I don't know if anyone could afford that, but just using that as an example, the square footage might make more sense if we're looking for a way to try and, you know, level the playing field here. The fee, I mean, eliminating fee for the $50, really the same argument to eliminate the $50 fee could be used to eliminate the $500 fee. It's exactly the same argument, right? So my only caution to council is that, you know, we're trying to keep our taxes low. We use the mentality of non-resident fees, which have yet to be banged out, but you know, we've agreed that we need to do cost recovery and not subsidize as much, whether it's non-residents or even the services we deliver to our own residents. So I just think it would be a little weird to set aside the $50 fee, but still charge the 500. So if truly that's our appetite, then why do we just make the whole thing free anyway? Do away with the whole concept of square footage and everything? Because, you know, really, why give the advantage to the sidewalk guy and make the restaurant who's, you know, going to have to invest all this money in fencing and everything else? Why charge them a fee? They got way more skin in the game than the person who puts out 2 chairs and a book table or something. So I guess where I'm going here is that I don't know if I understand where you're coming from, but from a business perspective, which is how we're trying to look at these things, I don't think the fee is unreasonable. It's cost recovered only. We're not making the profit on it. And if we are going to look at making people pay for the space they use, I think we use a measure like square footage rather than, or square meters. Sorry, I'm still in my old school system. Rather than, you know, something is kind of ambiguous as a parking spot. So I'm just throwing that out there for consideration. Council, I'm in your hands either way, but just some thoughts for the conversation right now.
Counselor Ball?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the square footage. I think that makes the most sense. In terms of the $50 fee versus the 500 having the same argument, I don't believe it is, because I would say a bistro table is considered a patio as far as I'm concerned, but I was thinking more like this is for vases and for things that do not actually make money for the business. They're beautifying their outdoor space. So yes, that would draw more people in, but it's not going to have an effect on whether they sell more product. Whereas a patio does give them more value. It gives them more square footage to their space and to their restaurant. So I don't think it's the same thing. So I don't think it's the same argument.
Counselor McDonald?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't have a problem with the $5.25 or the $50. A sidewalk usage to me isn't setting a bistro table out. It's displaying a product or beautifying in a way. I have 2 questions. One is, has the BIA been consulted on this at all in regards to square footage versus certain parking spots, or they're okay with the status quo? Obviously, we want to improve it. And the patio design details, which is on the attached document, it says patios shall be comprised of a structural, functional, and decorative features. What some people might find decorative, I might find not so. I wonder if there's any standards there or any consistency. That's what I found with the downtown Midland patios last year. Everyone was different, which can be appealing, but if there was some consistency, I think it would be even more attractive. So I don't know whether we want to reach into that or not, or anyway, looks like we've got some more chatting to do about this.
Counselor Downer?
Thank you. I stand in support with Councillor Meredith. I don't have a problem with what he proposes at all. So I will support that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. To answer your question, Councillor McDonald, the BIA is waiting to see what's happening here in council with the patio program. The beautification of the patios, we are in talks right now of having a standard and possibly working with the town. This hasn't been discussed with the town, I believe, at the moment. But surprise, surprise, but the BIA is working on enhancing the patios and having a certain standard to beautify downtown. And some of the patios, I think we had previous discussions on one particular patio that was not only unsafe, but looked pretty tired. So we're hoping to present, the BIA to come to talk to the town and possibly take over that possible patio program, beautification, or work with them or enhance. I'm not sure what the BIA's legal, parameters are, but we're definitely, that has been a topic of discussion. So, and in our last BIA meeting, and something to, beautify with flowers and beautiful planters and so forth. So that is in the process. Also on the difference between there is a difference between the $50, the municipal sidewalk and the patio. That the outdoor patio is taking up a parking spot, which is taking up revenue. So that's why there's a $500 fee there. When there's a paid parking next year. So that's why when you take up a spot, someone has to pay for it because you're taking up revenue from the town. The municipal sidewalk, as long as you have additional payee on the town on your insurance, that has been going on for decades. Whether you put a chair outside your rest or your shop that has, for the husbands that don't want to go in there to sit there with maybe their dog, but they're not actually selling, the use of the sidewalk is not a money generating area for the town. So there's the difference in that. So the $50 fee, I mean, it's with an additional payee, and as long as the town knows that and you put in the application, there should be no cost at all. So I know it's $50 but every penny counts when you're in small business. So I just want to make sure that that's differentiate. So we're not going to include the patio in that package in your description. Mayor Gordon, thank you.
Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. Perhaps, Julie, you can help with this. Even though we're getting them to indemnify us or whatever the language is in there, I assume that joint and several and subrogation still kicks in regardless. And if I'm going to play the hypothetical, someone trips over the chair leg and busts their knee, they're going to go after the store's insurance, but then store's insurance, is that entirely covering us, Ms. Ellery, or are we still on the hook because of this whole joint and several and subrogation and whatever it's called when the insurance companies attack each other for cash? I just want to make sure that this $50 is really extemporaneous and really not something that is true cost recovery as it's being depicted.
To you, your worship, joint and several would come into play in certain circumstances. So in the case of, say, a lawsuit, if somebody did trip and fall, we would have an indemnification. However, where the issue would lie would be once an injury hit, say, the maximum of that insurance policy, which is generally $2 million. If an injury were to cause a claim to be in excess of the $2 million, they would come after the town policy because our policy is significantly more than that. So the joint and several liability would come into play then, and perhaps our policy would then have to step up for anything over and above the policy limit of the property owner or the applicant for use of the sidewalk. So there is a component. It would first have to make the leap past that policy limit before it would attack the town one. And the other issue with joint several is if the town were even 1% liable, they could come after the town in as separately as well. So they would name both while we have an indemnification. If there's a separate kind of claim that would be strictly against the town for, say, maintenance or repair of the sidewalk or something of that nature, they could fall with it outside the indemnification clause that would be in the agreement between the applicant and the town.
Okay, so as usual, insurance is the fun governor. However, we can't always protect ourselves from all possible liability. $2 million is a fair bit. A $50 fee on this thing is not the hill I'm dying on tonight. So if council's will is to eat this and roll the dice, I'm not going to stand in your way. My only question will be is where we're at with this amendment. Are we looking at the parking space fee, or are we looking at square footage? Because I think we just need to tidy up what exactly the amendment is, and then we need to get that wordsmith and put it on the floor as an amending motion for this. I'm not trying to stifle conversation, but if there's more commentary on this, but I just thought we should tidy up what we're actually debating here.
Councillor Meredith?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. Yeah, so the square footage, I'm talking about parking spaces here, not square footage. So if you're 2 feet into another parking space, you're taking away that parking space. So I think we should put a limit on it up to 2, or every business should have has the option of taking away 1 parking space versus 2. But I would go to a maximum of 2 right now. But square footage is who pays for that other half of square footage that is not being utilized by another car. So it's not going to work that way. I don't see it that way. It should be cut and dry, 1 or 2 parking spaces. And that's the way it should be. Thank you. Yeah, I would, sorry, for you, Deputy Mayor Prost, I would definitely put an amendment on this to limit to up to 2 parking spaces. Instead of, right now it's open. It just has, it's open to as many parking spaces as you want for $500. So the amendment should read something like $500 per parking space up to a maximum of 2 parking spaces. Thank you.
Councillor East?
Through your worship, Deputy Mayor, I would second his motion.
Mayor Gordon?
Okay, so I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. Some of the stores downtown, their storefront does not line up perfectly with the parking space. So that could mean a store that is like a sliver, like there's lots of little tiny stores downtown, would have to pay for 2 parking spaces, because if you look at those little black lines with the delineate parking, that little sliver store, in order to have a small patio, because it would be encroaching onto what is defined as 2 parking spaces, would be into $1,000. Whereas some other store that just happened to be bigger than the parking spaces as they happen to line up, they could have an equally large patio for $500. So because parking spaces don't line up perfectly with the building's dimensions, by doing this by how many parking spaces you consume, assuming half a parking space now renders the parking space moot, unless you're a bicycle or an e-bike or something. This just doesn't seem, I'm trying to square this for parity for the buildings downtown, because they're not all uniform shape and size, and the buildings parking spaces do not line up with the building dimensions. So how do you reconcile that for the little sliver store that has the only, they can't put it on their, in front of their block in their neighbor's store, so they'd have to basically eat 2 parking spaces to have a patio. How do we, they're going to come to us looking for a remedy, no doubt.
Councillor Meredith?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. So I understand what you're saying, but look at it the other way on the businesses that don't have the patios. And there's 4 parking spaces out in front of their building, but they only have, because there's a patio that encompasses 1 full one and a third and a third on each side. There's only 1 parking spot for all those businesses on that block. So if you spin it the other way, it's unfortunate that these bollards are there. I think, and we only have a handful of restaurants. So, and I haven't fully looked at, I've looked at 2 of them to see where they lined up. But when the bylaw is set, it goes for everybody, even new restaurants. So I get what you're saying, but I'm thinking the other way for the for the retail shops or the other restaurants that don't have patios that are affected from even the drugstores, where people just want to drop off and run in. It's limiting. So when you do square footage, you're still going to go into other parking spots. Could be a half, right? Or on each direction. So you're basically, and they're taking up 3, and it's costing $525 versus the same person that's taking up 1 is costing them $525, and it's hurting the retail stores around them. So I think I'm gonna have to let staff figure that one out and maybe come back to that one. And well, yeah, I mean, if a car can't pass, or sorry, if a car can't park in that parking spot, then where those gray lines are, if you can't get a car in there, then that's a parking spot. But if you're going to go over the line, I know it's so the problem is our lines are gray, right? And a lot of people are parking, a quarter over those lines. So it's not only the patios and trust me, I want the patios there. But I'm also had complaints from retail stores about the amount of parking spots the patios are taking, which doesn't make sense to them, right? But the lines are a problem too, because you can't see the lines and people are parking, taking up 2 spots versus, when they should be in the designated lines, but they're not seeing them. And clearly they're not, they probably should have been a different color, but this is yeah, I'm not sure if we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think it needs to be probably addressed. Maybe not in this session, but I definitely think if you take up more than 1 parking spot, you should pay for it, and you should have a maximum of 2. You shouldn't be able to take up the whole block of parking spots, even if it's a square footage and they want to pay $2,000-$3,000 for the year. You'll have retail stores screaming at us. So there has to be a solution here.
Counselor East?
Okay, Your Worship, again. So Bill and I, and we've actually discussed it with the BIA. I don't know who we would talk to sitting around us here, but we wanted to see white lines put down, white or yellow lines put down so that we could actually verify what parking spots are what. Now, the thing is, I know this is kind of offset from what we're talking about the restaurants, but because we lost a huge parking lot downtown, as it is, we're going to be fighting for parking spots as it is for stores, for retail stores. Now, the thing is, and I don't mean to pick on anybody because I see the benefits of it, but the thing is that, for instance, across the street from me is a restaurant that takes up 3 parking spots and leaves 1 little parking spot for the rest of the retail stores on the left side. And they're only paying $500 for it. So now all of the stores, except for that restaurant, are suffering because we can't make the shopping easy. So the thing is, if we had very specific white parking lines, then what we're doing is we're indicating a parking spot. And then we don't have to worry about the square footage thing because we're now saying you're paying for this parking spot. We don't care if it lines up in front of your store or not. You want a patio, well, this is the parking spot that you're going to buy. But you can't sell it if we don't have parking spots. You're absolutely right. We don't have parking spots. So the thing is, if we make very, very clear indications of what those parking perimeters are, then we can start selling those parking spots. And those parking spots are going to become very important when we start charging for parking again in the future. And we're going to need that clarity on those parking spots because, once again, the whole point of shopping is to keep it simple and easy. And what I can tell you right now, by us losing those 2 parking lots, even though the one has opened, what was the one thing that I heard from customers? They kept driving around until they could find a spot. Now, I know that we're trying to navigate the downtown as to walking, but the truth is, what's convenient for people? They drive. Eventually, hopefully someday it'll be people walking and taking advantage of a walking downtown, but right now it's got to be convenient. So what I'm proposing and what I'm asking is, can we look at today setting forth some lines to indicate what the parking spots are? And then we can look at what Bill's saying about selling or renting one of those parking spots. That will get around the square footage problem. Can we look at doing that today?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. Currently, the design right now, and I can let Mitch speak to that a little bit more if need be, but the design is that they are marked by the color of the bricks. So there's solid black colored all in a row to mark each spot. So they are marked. They aren't necessarily marked in fluorescent paint color though. If that was something council wanted to do, you know, that could be something you could direct staff to do. I know that it was designed that way on purpose and with intent, you know, around how, you know, what the image is and how that looks. And then also just to add, square footage wise, again, you could have, you know, the same patio square footage wise, just because of where the bollards line up. If two businesses could have in theory the same exact patio square footage wise, but then have two spots or three, say, that would be taken up for the same size, and it would be through no fault of their own, just based on where things line up. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Follow up, Councillor East?
Thank you for responding. So I actually see the way people park downtown. The black does absolutely nothing. They park wherever they want. You can have one car parked and then no cars can park around it because those black bricks don't mean nothing. I'm telling you, whoever designed it must have been off in La La Land because they park wherever they want. So the thing is that if we can construct perimeters, and what I'm asking today, right now, is let's put forth an opportunity to paint lines. And then we can run with what Bill's saying and just rent out the parking spots. Parking spots are very important, okay, for downtown businesses. And if you have one car taking up two spots because they don't know how to park, because there's no lines, we're fighting some very important things here. So what I'm asking my fellow council to do is to right now approve, let's put down some lines. It'll construct some rules on how to park downtown. And then we can look at just renting spots. And I fully support what Bill's saying about renting each spot $500. You want 3 spots, you can pay for 3 spots because you're taking business away from other retailers. So what I'm asking my fellow councilors right now is whatever we have to do to have these white lines put down so that we could get these parking spots right. And then I will support Bill Meredith on renting each spot for $500.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to council. I just want to touch on the design of King Street and really bring up the fact that the original design of King Street, which council was a part of and endorsed and part of the steering committee that took a number of years to get to the design that was actually approved by the committee had no lines at all. It was a cohesive, there was no set parking spaces with the idea that pickup truck takes up a different amount of space than a smart car. And if you can fit 10 smart cars in the space that you can get 5 pickup trucks, that's great. That's good for downtown. When it came time to go to the constructions, staff looked at that and said, this is probably going to create some problems, right? People are going to have their own definition of what's suitable parking. So we tried our best to implement a way of the design that we could delineate parking spaces without taking away from the design intent that the steering committee directed staff to design and our designers. So that was how we ended up with the black lines. It could still be treated in a way that people do park wherever. And again, that was the original intent. The whole design on King Street was to be flexible for patios, flexible for parking, flexible for barrier-free crossings throughout the street. So I just wanted to add to that. That's why the decision is there. It was, you know, ultimately a council endorsed decision to get there. And to Mr. Flannery's point, sure, they could be painted. We could put paint on top of them. It's just, it'll change the look and feel in a certain degree.
Quick follow-up, Counselor East and then Counselor Ball and Counselor McDonald.
Thank you. It will be quick. And I appreciate, the sentiment behind it, but it's not working. I think it's worth the chance just to see if it's successful. The planters that were put downtown take up even more parking spots. We've lost a huge parking lot. So parking is an issue downtown. Okay, I know that we have the whole waterfront, but once again, shopping has to be easy. If we can't make it easy, it won't be successful for business owners. So I think it's well worth a shot. Let's put down the paint, see how it works, and then we can actually say, let's sell some parking spots. So what I'm asking right now is let's get some paint down this summer. Let's see if we can change this and just see if this is successful for parking. Because parking is really an issue downtown, and we have to make it simple so that our businesses can thrive.
Counselor Ball.
Thank you. I am going to get such hate for this comment, but I actually don't think that there's a problem with parking downtown. I'm there daily. There's tons of parking downtown. I think actually there's underutilized parking lots. Sensationally Delicious has a very underutilized parking lot. Explorers, again, almost empty. I'm giving away all my secret spots now, but I don't think adding paint is going to do anything except for waste money. I think people are still going to park wherever they want on those because it's just the way they are designed. And I think that the only problem where, the only time where it becomes a problem is if it's for somebody who is disabled and needs that parking, which that should be clearly outlined as a spot, which it is. Anyone else can walk the side streets, have tons of parking. I've never had an issue with parking except for maybe at Rib Fest, and I was still able to find a spot. So I think that it isn't as big of an issue as we think it is. It's maybe not convenient for someone to park right outside of the store. I agree with the parking spots being taken up by the patio and having a lot of, I guess, encroaching on two separate spots. But I also think that, to Mayor Gordon's point, that you can't line up those parking spots exactly in front of the store. So there does need to be a balance. We can't just charge someone for 3 spots. Square footage is at least giving more value. I mean, we can raise the square footage price so that you're paying closer to a 2-spot parking if it's about revenue. But in terms of parking, I think there is a lot of parking downtown.
Counselor McDonald.
Thank you. First of all, I'm glad to hear that the BIA is looking into having some consistency in the design of the patios. But I'm seeking clarification on, is it the parking spots that's the problem, or those bollards that they move to take the parking spot? Are they in the wrong place, and how, if they are, how easy is it to put them so that they mark just the certain area?
Through Deputy Mayor Provost, Councilor John. So are you asking if there can be modifications made to the bollard locations? The answer is yes. It will cost money, right? So those bollards each have a base. The base are cast in concrete, and they were cast in an interval down the street. So there's 2 bollards per parking space. There's 1 bollard at each end in the line and 1 bollard in the middle. And then in some locations on the store side, there isn't a bollard where there might be a lamp post or a tree or something like that. So they are, I wouldn't say they're in the wrong location. They're in a consistent pattern down the street that's in a reasonable amount of distance to protect the pedestrians, because we do have to keep in mind that with the flexible design, we no longer have a barrier curb in there, which is used to protect vehicles from exiting the roadway and onto the sidewalk and hitting people, and that's what the bollards are for. So that the intent is to make it difficult for vehicles to get through that and into patios and pedestrians and whatnot. So could it be modified? Absolutely. It would be work. We'd be cutting concrete. It'd be dusty. It would be repouring concrete. But it could be done.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just as a follow-up, yes. As a pilot project, could we just remove them and use a temporary one to see how it works? For certain patio designs, because I understand it's where the bollards or whatever they're called in front of the store is what's taking up the parking spots. Correct? So where they're placed, they're taking up 3 spots, whereas if they were placed strategically and only taking up 1, and then they'd still have their patio, but could we use a temporary one and just remove the other one to try it?
Through Deputy Mayor Prost to Councilor McDonald. The challenge, like the mayor alluded to earlier and Mr. Flannery, is where is the property line in the building? The property line in some buildings have multiple units within one legal property. So it's very hard to line those up, obviously, with a parking location. Could we, when we have to move the bollards to move the pedestrians around a patio per se, we have minimum standards we have to meet as far as width and whatnot. So based on the size of the patio or the location based on where the parking stalls are, sometimes we have no choice but to move into half of a parking stall. And I've seen some of the patios out there, you end up with a half stall that can't be used, right? Based on the way the bollards have to be moved. In some cases, an intermediate bollard could maybe help that. But it wouldn't in all cases. And you necessarily aren't going to regain a full parking space, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
Ms. Ellery?
Sorry, I just wanted, through you, Deputy Mayor, through to Councilor McDonald, I just wanted to make one comment about the use of a temporary bollard or a temporary barrier. I want to make sure that we're being very aware that these are used to protect the pedestrians and the people on the sidewalks. So by using either a temporary barrier or something different other than the bollards that we have there, we could be putting pedestrians and or users of these patios at some risk, because it does leave it open that these vehicles could leave the traveled portion of the roadway and come up onto the sidewalk areas and possibly have some issues with those individuals in that area.
Councilor Emeritus?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. I didn't mean to open a can of worms here. I really just wanted to, to limit the amount of parking spaces, but as Mr. Sobel stated, that they're kind of flex spaces. They're not, although we do have parking lines and our parking revenues were based on those as parking spots, but now you're telling me they're not really parking spots because a truck could take up 2 spaces or whatever, right? So we did actually get some crazy number way back when of parking revenues. So if we're talking about those are flex spaces, then Mayor Gordon's suggestion of square footage and working with the BIA, and although those bollards won't line up, we could have barriers as in tall planters and so forth, which the BIA is working on and going to approach the town on, that can define those spaces of patios that could be possibly in front of the storefronts or just shifted over a bit. But if we're not talking about those lines as being parking spaces or the parameters of where to parking, then yeah, we just wasted a lot of time here. So if it's a parking spot, it's a parking spot. If it's a flex space where, my truck fits between the two lines, you're not going to get a town, dump truck in there. But so are those spaces? So it's a flex space.
Through Deputy Mayor to Council. The original design was flexible where there was no lines at all. What's out there today reflects a standard size parking stall that fits a pickup truck. And if a little car parks in the middle of it, there's wasted space, right? So they are sized like a typical parking size today.
Just to follow up. So if you're not parked properly, is there a bylaw that, is it would be enforced that I don't know, like, because those lines are a problem. yeah, and you've seen it. I'm sure most staff have seen it. People walking downtown, no one sees the lines. I see them, I know they're there, but tourists come in, half of them are parked on the street, half of them are parked not in the parameters of the parking spots. So there is a problem. And I'm just trying to limit some, and I'm just talking about patios right now because there's an unfair advantage to them having the free realm of the whole as much as they want for $500 or $525. So that is a problem. And I just bringing it up and addressing it, and it should be addressed, and there should be limitations, whether it's square footage or 2 parking spaces. I think that's a good start.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To Councillor Meritus. You had proposed a motion. Councillor East had seconded it, but I am unclear as to what the amendment is.
So the amended motion was to limit the patios to 2 parking spaces maximum, with a fee of $500 per parking space.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To Councillor Meritus. I had drafted, I think you're referring to the fees and charges bylaw, correct? So we haven't really dealt with that yet, but the amendment would be, if you look at the fees and charges bylaw, where it says outdoor patio town property, I think the amount was $525. So now the motion I had was that bylaw 2024-20 being the 2024 fees and charges be amended as follows. Bylaw and parking, outdoor patio program, town property, $500 per space to a maximum of 1,000. Had you said a maximum of 1,000?
Sorry,
Correct.
Madam Clerk, if I may, could we amend that to say to a maximum of 2 spaces? I think it might be clearer.
Madam CAO?
Yeah, through the deputy clerk, just to expand on that, this would then come as part of the fees and bylaw that are further, fees and charges that is further down. So, so we can have this motion ready for that. And then we would just take it out of the discussion from this motion that's on the table right now. So it wouldn't be part of this motion in the discussion. It would move to the fees and charges. And then this discussion would just talk about, sorry, there are the 3 items on this one to receive as information, and then the other 3 talking about the outdoor usage bylaw that is attached, that has no fees attached to it. The second is the permit of the $50 for the sidewalk. And then the third motion would be to allow us to modify the fees and charges to reflect that $50.
Mayor Gordon?
Madam CEO, would you prefer that, I mean, based on what I'm hearing here, we're gonna get rid of the $50. So would you rather we vote down 2 and 3, or would you like us to put amendment on to change it to 0? To change number 2 to a permit fee of, $0 for town sidewalks usage be approved. And then 3 would still stand because we'd have to adjust the fees and charges bylaw. So that would mean an amendment to the second item. Is that the cleanest way, or do you want us just to vote down the second?
Madam CAO?
Yes, so through the deputy mayor, we could modify the second one to be, you're right, a $0. And then on the third one, we could actually also modify that to reflect, so I'm going to take back what I just said, but to reflect the additional or the $500 for the 2 parking spaces. And then we would have it in the motion to modify the fees and charges when we get to that.
Counselor Ball?
I was just going to say we haven't decided between the parking spots versus square footage, so I don't think we should be able to modify that in any way until we actually decide that. I said that we haven't decided if it's going to be per space capped at 2 spaces, $500 a space, or if we're charging a square footage amount. So actually changing it to state that it's going to be a fee based off 2 spaces, we haven't decided that yet.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To Councillor Ball. The motion on the floor is for the 2 spaces. So yes, council has not voted on that yet, but we're just trying to figure out the best way to present it.
Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. So again, now that we've learned that there aren't really spaces, I mean, there kind of are, but there aren't. Because I'll tell you right now, it's in the wintertime, you can't tell. And even if you painted them yellow in the winter, half the time they're covered in snow, so you couldn't see them anyway. This design was meant to be, as described, just free form. You park where there's space for your vehicle. And that's why I'm suggesting the square footage makes sense. So I'm not talking about square footage of the patio. I'm talking about the square footage you're using of the parking area, we'll call it, rather than parking space. It's more like a parking area. So if we came up with a fee per square foot of the parking area, which does not include the sidewalk area, you know, that might be the easiest path forward on this, and we could cap that's maximum square footage. The other comment is that, remember, we don't have curbs, right? This is a curbless design meant to be barrier-free and accessible. That's why there's bollards. If there was curbs, there'd be something at least that the car would have to hop, even if it started to roll on its own because the brake let go or whatever. The curb is the barrier. We don't have that. So bollards are used all over the world. This exact bollard, the same dimensions, height, size, and everything is used everywhere. I mean, New York City, Toronto, Barrie, you name it. So even though they're, you know, largely loathed here, and I know there's a few that have my truck paint on them, that it is what it is, and we can come up with some other ways. We've already talked to the BIA about some creative solutions, some skins that slide on them for advertising to make them more visible and a bit taller. But we got to remember that we can't be bending ourselves into pretzels to redesign King Street to accommodate a $500 patio. Like, this is just absurd. That's like $15 million project. So let's keep this in scope here. We want to encourage some patios. We're coming up with some cost recovery on it. The $500 per parking space, I would argue, is we're giving it away. When we actually figure out what a parking unit downtown is revenue wise for this town, it's more than $500 a year. So it could very well be $15,000 a year per spot in the final calculation. And so we need to keep that in perspective when we're basically deciding to comp parking spaces downtown, which clearly they're not as many as there used to be. So let's not paint ourselves into a corner here. I believe that the best path forward is to come up with a square footage calculation. And for the area that is parking that we are giving up, cap it so that somebody can't take the whole, block, and realize that we're not entertaining redesigning the downtown King Street in this methodology. We're just come up with a way to recover some basic costs right now, knowing that at some point that cost recovery is going to climb, because I have no doubt that the cost per parking unit per vehicle downtown would bring in more than $500 of revenue at some point. So just my comments on this one. I'd really like to see us go with square footage and just come up with a fee, or we could even refer this back to staff to tell us what that number should look like. And then we can get to the fees and charges bylaw, which is my comments on this.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The motion is on the floor for the 2 spaces, so council should vote on that amendment at this time.
Councilor Meredith?
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost. I would agree with Mayor Gordon, and I would do that. I would figure out what that one parking spot was, right? And then any additional, divide that, whatever our square footage number is, and charge accordingly. And then hopefully this will probably come back up. And then, as I said, with the BIA, we can work together and create some beautiful barriers for these spaces. I'd hate to, charge someone for another 2 feet, another, and still 2 little cars can get in there. I see your point. So this is a good first step for a solution. And then whatever that, maybe it's $750 for a parking spot. I don't know what that number is, but we're going to have a committee for the parking and so forth. So, but this is a great first step. So thank you. So we can vote that down and kind of tweak it to square footage, or would I withdraw that?
Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Emeritus, you can withdraw the motion.
Okay, I would withdraw that motion and go to a square footage formula, whether it's at this meeting right now or bring it back to council. Thank you.
Through Deputy Mayor Pros to Councillor Emeritus. So an average parking spot is 2.8 meters by 6.7 meters. So that's just under 19 square meters. And so if we were using that $500 fee as the target, that would basically work out to $26.65. Do we want to round up $27? That would give us essentially the same revenue. Alternatively, if we wanted to sort of set the $500 as a flat rate, and then in addition, a square meter rate, if, to your point, if they exceeded sort of that one space. And I think that would achieve what you're looking for.
Yes, and then we should put it into a maximum as well. So we're not going into, the whole parking area.
So again, to the maximum of the 2 spaces. Okay, we can work on some language for that.
Great, thank you.
Maybe council, just a quick point of clarity here. So we're moving the permit fee for a sidewalk usage to 0. But we're not removing the requirement to come to the town and indemnify us and prove that they have all this coverage. We're just not going to recover our costs of doing that. Like we're not just saying, go ahead and do it. No, we're not charging you, but there's still a process you got to follow. Is that still a fair statement? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I could just picture Ms. Ellery thinking, what? So, yeah, fair
No,
enough.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know where it's.
Okay, council's going to take a 5-minute bio break while we get things in order. Okay, I have some motions on the floor here. I'll have, it was moved by Councillor Emeritus and seconded by Councillor East. The staff report CSR 2024 30 outdoor patio and municipal property usage dated March 20th, 2024 be received, and 1, the outdoor patio and municipal property usage bylaw as attached be approved, and that the outdoor patio town property fee be a flat rate of $500 for a standard area of 18.76 square meters, and that an additional rate of $26.65 per square meter be added additional, used up to a maximum of 37.52 square meters, which is 2 spaces. 3, that the town's 2024 fees and charges bylaw be amended accordingly. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, I have a second motion here. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ball and Councillor East. As proposed in staff report CSR 2024 30, that a permit fee of $50 for town sidewalk usage be approved. All those in favor? All those opposed? Defeated. So we're on to 17.2, CSR 2024 30-32, Young Street Reconstruction Project. Council reviewed staff report CSR 2024 32 and the recommendations contained therein, and the following motion was presented. Could I get a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor? Councillor East, Councillor Emeritus. Sorry, this has changed a little. The staff report CSR 2024 32 Young Street Reconstruction Project dated March 20th, 2024 regarding the bike lanes on Young Street be received, and that council directs staff to implement council's desired bike facility option along Young Street as a part of the Young Street Reconstruction Project. And I'm just reading the first part because I think we're splitting it into 2. Okay, so to carry on, the Young Street Reconstruction Project, and 2, the council directs staff to implement the desired guidance for 4th Street. We have any discussion, or Mayor Gordon?
Thank you very much. So I actually have an amendment that I'll be tabling in a moment with council's consent here. I think we missed one important step on the consultation on the reconstruction project. So this is an excellent report. You can see the results of our public information center that we hosted, and the presentation and what people overwhelmingly wanted. And the ironic thing is, the thing that most people wanted of the options presented to them, of course, was status quo. As it turns out, though, that doesn't work with the MTO. It kind of did when we winged it before, but we can't now, and we need some kind of delineation for the cyclists. We can't just have paint. So the one question we didn't ask though was who wants to put it back to the way it was, which was 4 lanes, and have our cyclists, young children, off the road and on the sidewalk where they belong as young kids riding to school, because it's perfectly legal for them to ride on the sidewalk up to their 12 years old, and have adult cyclists doing what they do on any road that doesn't have a painted delineation for cyclists, which is ride legally on the paved surface of the road, obeying the rules of the road. So the rationale here is that we only have 2 main east-west corridors. And there's Hugel and there's Young. Young is our truck route. It is our main arterial road. It is the main artery through our town. We have Hugel, which is painted and is accessible to people biking. It's a bit of a challenge, a bit more hilly, but a lot of people are using e-bikes now. And quite frankly, there's the jury's still out on how many people actually bike on Young Street, and we have no metrics, no calculations. We have anecdotal evidence from people that are avid cyclists saying, oh, it's used all the time. And everybody else is like, I see 3 bikes a year. I'm not going to base an argument on hypotheticals and things we have no empirical evidence on. I'm just going to suggest that we missed the opportunity when we had this pick of letting the community say, hey, listen, as we grow and our needs grow and our vehicular traffic grows, which I'm sorry to the people that are active transportation nuts, enthusiasts, I won't call you nuts. I meant that in a friendly way. As our needs grow, cars aren't going anywhere. We're going to have more and more. That's a truck route. That's the main way to get people through town. And as our area expands, as we're growing on our perimeters, and we will be, there's hundreds and hundreds of new residential units going to be built in the next 10 years out there. It's not like they're never going to come into town. They need to travel in the cars that they enjoy, and they need to do that efficiently on a road that can move masses from one end of town to the other. And we have one road that's always done that. So for many, many, many years, decades, actually, it's been 4 lanes, and bicyclists used it, and it wasn't, the killing fields or anything for cyclists. So I think we missed the mark in not exploring that as an option. And so I'm not really happy that this report only gives us, the options that it does. Although I understand why it does that, because that's all we asked. So I have a motion here, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor East, that council directs staff to investigate the possibilities, including risks and benefits, of course, of other options for Yonge Street, including consideration to reverting back to 4 lanes. So what I'm asking council to support is to have council or to staff include that option for our deliberation before we pull the trigger and tell staff what to do with Yonge Street. And I think we're missing some information right now, and I don't like making decisions without all information present. I'm not asking you to vote for that. I'm asking you to get the information in front of council, and then we can have a fulsome discussion about all 4 options rather than the 3 we are faced with right now. So that's my rationale for this this amendment, and it would effectively mean we're going to send this report back. We're not going to vote on options. We're not giving direction. We're not making a decision on even 4th Street unless we agree to split today. And I would suggest we wait. Let's get this report back. Let's send this back to staff, and let's get one more option put on the table for our consideration. And then let's have the fulsome discussion about how we want to redo the street so that it's not just built for today's needs, but for the future and the growth that we're expecting over the next 10, 20 years. So that's what I'm asking and the rationale for it. And I'm more than happy to take any questions. And whenever the deputy mayor's done with our questions, there's the motion for the vote. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, to your worship. If council, since you put the amendment on the floor, I would suggest you pass a motion to suspend the procedures to deal with the 2 recommendations separately. And I've given that motion to Deputy Mayor Prost, if that's how council would like to proceed with the recommendations.
Okay, first I'd like to hear from Councillor Ball.
Thanks. I just actually want to add to the amendment because there is another option as well. And if we're going to take back a report, I think we should have the information for that as well. I know Mr. Sobel already has it, extending the multi-use trail all the way down to 4th or to 1st, because that option people were against was because it stops at 8th Street. I think I'd like to see the numbers of it extending all the way down for a multi-use trail. So if we're sending it back, I would like that included in the amendment as well. I know Mr. Sobel already has it, but he can include it in the report.
Go ahead.
Thank you through you, the Mayor Prost to Councillor Ball. So of the options that were provided, I'll go through the whole list. The status quo do nothing option, which is just the reconstruction, do it as it is today, was $8.5 million. The upgrade to the option 2 with the bollards, like we recommended in the report, was $9 million, so an additional $500,000. The option 3A, which was the multi-use trail in the North Boulevard from County Road 93 up to 8th Street, was $9.5 million. So an additional 500,000 above and beyond. And then the option to continue the multi-use trail all the way down to King Street or First Street in that neighborhood was $11 million. So it was $1.5 million. And there's a lot of unknowns with that one. It could be $2 million more, but we can most certainly, if council wishes, as part of analyzing that, we can go further into that idea and get a little more concrete numbers on that if you wish.
Councillor Ball?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that it's worth, as you're saying, we're looking at growth. And I know when you're talking about 12 and under biking, I'm not putting my kids on the sidewalk and me on the road. That's not going to work for that option, I don't think. So I think we do need to explore options, especially for Mundy's Bay. We have problems with 6th Street parking nonstop. We're trying to encourage people to go to that school using walking and biking, and having them on the road and their kids on a sidewalk, I don't think is cohesive to that. So I would like to explore that option. I know it's more expensive, but I think that NT Power does have to upgrade at some point. Their infrastructure on that road is not supportive of what any growing needs are. So at some point, although they have not come to the table, they're going to have to put money towards infrastructure that would hopefully align with the construction of this. So I would like to add that as an option, so we can at least have it on the floor to discuss.
Councillor McDonald?
I do recall at the public meeting, hearing someone inquire about going back to 4 lanes. And I thought it wasn't possible because wasn't wide enough. So is it even feasible to send you back to look at it if it's not possible?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councilor McDonald, it is possible. When the road diet was implemented back in 2017, nothing was changed with the cross section. They basically put 3 lanes. They took 4 lanes and made 3 plus 2 bike lanes. Basically, 2 bike lanes are just under the width of a normal lane. So the question is, could it go back to the way it was before as is? Yes, it could. The challenge with the space, the comment that you might have heard in the PIC, is the typical arterial road right-of-way is in the neighborhood of 30 meters wide, and Yonge Street is only 20 meters wide. So when we try to fit a multi-lane road in, sidewalks and separated bike facilities, it becomes very challenging in the retrofitting into a right-of-way that's the same width as a local road in a neighborhood. So that's kind of the space constraints that we find, not to mention the existing utilities in there as well.
Thank you.
Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. So just in short, all we would be doing is repainting back to the way it was, because we made no physical changes to the road. And presumably the cost would be just the paint, because we're doing nothing else. So effectively, we're asking for the road, we're going to give one road to the cars. The evil gas guzzling cars. Well, there's electric ones out there too. We can't paint them all with the same brush just because I drive big V8s. But we're going to let one path through the town be for the vehicles that, most people are operating still, and I don't think are going anywhere. And that's the quickest, most expedient, efficient way to get people from one side of town to the other. For the trucks and everything, it's truck road, and all the other beautiful parks and trails that we've got in our Trucks and Trails Master Plan, or other roads we've already painted and made allowances for bikes. I don't think we should pump the brakes on cycling in our community in the slightest. Really is not a bad thing at all. But I'm just saying, as I suggested, this is a missed opportunity to, let's just make one road the quick and easy way through town for the majority of the people that are traveling. So I agree with Councillor Ball's request. Let's also see what those other costs are. But I'm also looking for the most cost-effective way. And if it can cost us virtually nothing more than paint to, increase the capacity and bring this thing back to where it was, that will probably be my preference, but I'm going to reserve judgment until I see the reports because, staff know this way better than me. And just so you know, haven't had a litany of people telling me, oh, this is crazy. We want to go back to 4 lanes. We've had some, but generally from the questions asked, people are happy with status quo. But anyway, I hope to see the support to, let's get this report back with a couple more options. I like that second one. Let's see, because we do need to plan for the future. And I agree that it wouldn't be ideal to have your kid riding on the sidewalk and you 5 or 6 feet away, a multi-use trail would make a lot more sense, but that would be the best of both worlds. You have a multi-use trail and a main artery through town, and then you have your main road, which is meant to get the trucks and the cars and everybody going from places east to west, actually moving. And the Sunday driver folks that like the more scenic route can use any of the other roads in the community, but that's our main artery. That's our 400, if you will. So great idea. I support, I don't know if that wording has to change as a result, but yeah, I think we'll have to bolt that on to so the direction's given. But I totally support that amendment to my amendment.
Mr. Sobel?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. A couple points of clarification, one for myself and one to provide clarification. The cost to go back to 4 lanes would be the same cost as it is in our report to do status quo. It'd be the $8.5 million because we still have the reconstruction that we have to do of the underground services. So you still have this roughly the same amount of line paint, speaking approximates, but it's basically the same price. And just for my own clarification, if council decides to go this route to send us back to investigate a 4-lane option, back in 2017, when this whole road diet topic came up, we had a consultant review and look into it and provide projections on growth and the feasibility. And there was a whole report on it, which ultimately led to council's decision. If you send us away, are you looking for us to essentially redo that report, or are you looking for something different? Because that report, it spoke about the pros and cons of each system. It spoke about growth and the volume of traffic on the road and the speeds and whatnot. So I just want to make sure that it's clear what the direction is the staff to go back to, and I don't want to bring back a similar report if that's not council's desire.
From my perspective, I vaguely recall that report, but it's not right here. And I don't know if it took into account the growth that it did, like all the Bomb Beach Corridor Scope Secondary Plan, 93, 12, all that.
It did, and I have a couple numbers off the top of my head. So it included up to the old official plan, which is 2031, which had a growth value in the neighborhood of 22,500 people, which is the current growth value that we used in all of our master plans and our new official plan out to 2041. And it spoke about the traffic on Yonge Street at the time and the projected growth over that to that 2031 period. I can say that it considered up to 15,500-ish cars per day on Yonge Street in 2031, and we're in and around the 11,500. So we're well within that growth projection, and our growth number has changed from the 2031 target to the 2041 target. So we're on track. That's within that. It did consider for it, but obviously we can relook at it. But and I'm happy to circulate that report to council as well, if it would help. But just want to make sure that we're going away and we're coming back with what you're looking for.
Just from my perspective, I wouldn't expect you to redo the report. If you believe, based on your analysis, that it's still relevant today, that if we engage the same consultants or same type of consultants, we would get largely the same advice, in your professional opinion, I'd be content with seeing that report republished with what you come back to us with, and we use that. Whether we accept it or dismiss it or, whatever, that's politics, right? But it would definitely be worth, if it's still valid in your mind, it would be worth us seeing again.
So it just so happens that the consultant that wrote the report is our consultant for Yonge Street. So would be a relatively easy check and balance one way or another to verify if, in their opinion, the situation has changed or not. So we could do that.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Ball, I'd like to say something. If we're gonna go back to staff for anything and you guys are gonna come back to us, my one concern is trapping ourselves. If we take away the bike lanes, we can never put them back, or if we leave them, we can never move them as life changes through the years. I'd like to make sure that we're in a good position to be able to evolve with whatever comes our way. So I'd like to see that, so that we feel safe in whatever decision we end up making. Counselor Ball?
Thank you. I'd be content with that report, just with the actual figures of what it costs now. I know you didn't include the cost of the entire street because it isn't the most cost-effective option, and that is your job to give us cost-effective options. And to an extent, that's also our job, is to make sure the taxpayers are paying the lowest amount, but we also have to consider livability. And I think that I would like to see that included in this report. That I wouldn't suggest you do a new report if there's one already there. I would be content with a copy with just the figures of how much it's going to cost, but every figure that, so we can make a well-rounded decision just for the actual future, because that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at future years, so we don't have to keep redoing this.
Counselor McDonald?
Thank you. I'm not in favor of the amendment or the amendment that's forward, because I don't know what the advantage would be for 4-lane traffic, and I don't want to see the loss of the bike lanes. I think they're going to be used more as we progress, with the people realizing that's the way to go. And so why waste the staff's time and money on something I'm not going to support in the first place? And my reasoning behind it is the way it is now, it's a lane both ways, with a turning lane in the middle, which people are getting used to. And then once you cross King Street, you're down to 2 lanes. And that's through the town as well. So I can't see why we need 4 lanes at this point when we're just getting used to the bike lanes until we get the perfect solution. That's where I stand at this point.
Counselor Meredith?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. In the public meeting that was held down at the library, I attended that meeting, and the majority of the people that were there were six or Yonge Street residents, and probably most of the survey is them as well. When I had talked to them, their one comment was, "Put it back the way it was." So if I'm here doing my job and listening to my constituents, I would love to see that report. I didn't think it was an option. I did have a conversation with who were the engineers there that were Tatum. I did have a conversation with one of the fellows there about it being the main road coming in, and one of the questions I had for him, with all this growth that we're expected, it's going to kind of be a bottleneck, and there's no option basically which would have been to put it back. So I would love to see that report, and definitely I think before we jump the gun here, to make the right decision. Thank you.
So is there going to be another? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to add, just for clarification, we had intended on, obviously, if we got your endorsement on the design today, we proceed with the design, and the plan was to be at council as part of the 25 budget process so that we could be under construction in 25. Just want to make council aware that if we take a step back, relook at things, it'll be a couple months likely before we're back, just in the way that the reports have to be done and approved ahead of time. So that likely will jeopardize that schedule, and it won't be a 25 project. It would likely be pushed to a 26 project, which can be done. We do have infrastructure that's failing, but we will still be proceeding this year with some sewer relining on King Street that was approved as part of the budget, or Yonge Street, that was approved as part of it. So we will be doing some work there this year, regardless of what happens here tonight. It doesn't impact anything with the bike lanes. It's all sewers driven lately, but I just want to make that point clear that it just may rejig that schedule a little bit.
Mayor Gordon.
Or it may not, because I believe in you guys, and this is not rocket science. It's the way it was. So, and there's an existing report. So, and it's the same cost as option A, which you've already researched. So I have faith in you. I don't think we need to lose a year over council just wanting a bit more information tonight, although I appreciate the cautionary tale. I think you guys can make it happen. I believe in you.
Councillor Meredith.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost. Just one final question on financing this project. Do we have grants available for this project? Or is this coming from the tax base? Is it coming from surplus in revenue, surpluses from previous years? So how are we going to pay for this, and where's the bulk of the money? Is it already put away in reserves? So forth.
Through Deputy Mayor Prost, Councilor Meredith. As far to tackle the grants question, we're always looking for grants and applying where fits. Currently, we don't have any grants for this project, but we'll keep looking. Part of, one of step one for a grant quite often is having a part of your long-term plan and maybe being underway with design and whatnot. So we're in good shape from that perspective. So we'll keep on the look. Right now, in our long-term plan, based on the value, it's likely debt financed. But because it's in the 10-year plan, but it's not approved yet because we were going to bring that into 25, but it is considered as a debt financing project. Just because of the value, it was in the 25, it was in the part of the 2024 budget, it was in year 25 as a $9 million project.
And just a follow-up, and then there's any surpluses from previous years into the reserves wouldn't come into play in this project?
Through Deputy Mayor Prost to Councillor Meredith. When it comes time to finance the actual project, so typically we finance it internally first and then go to Infrastructure Ontario after. Now, again, we can get interim financing from them if needed at that time. We would look at, was there a grant that we can apply? Are there surpluses we can apply to reduce the end financing amount? But as far as from a budget perspective, we would budget the full 9 million or whatever that number ends up, being. And we could reduce it, but again, when you're spreading the payments out over 25 years, sometimes it's better just to sort of take the hit and keep those surpluses and reserves for other smaller projects. Because the whole debt financing process is quite administrative, and so you do want to sort of do it for those big projects, right? And so again, if we don't apply it to this project, we would certainly apply it to other projects that are needed in the town.
Just one follow-up. Would our investments in one investment be an option for this, and we pay ourselves the debt back with interest?
We certainly could. So there would be enough money currently in that community-wide initiative reserve with the intention that it be paid back. Now, again, that would still hit the annual tax rate because we would have to tax for it in order to repay it. But yeah, we're essentially paying ourselves the interest instead of an external party. So.
Any other questions? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I believe at this time, it's probably a good idea to have the motion to separate the recommendations. And I've given you that document, but I have a few more for you now.
Clarification, is there not an amendment on the floor that we have to vote on first?
motion madness here as we have amendments and splits and all kinds of stuff, so. We wish you well on this one. It gets complicated when we throw the monkey wrench into the gears.
It's definitely complicated tonight. Okay, I have a motion on the floor, moved by Counselor Downer, seconded by Counselor Ball, that council suspend the rules of procedure to allow for the recommendations as set out in item 17.2 CSR 204 32 Young Street reconstruction be considered separately. So I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Gordon. Counselor Bald. The staff report CSR 2024. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we're voting to split. Thought I could do. All those in favor of splitting this up? Carried. Oh, wrong one. Okay. Okay, so now moving on, moved by Counselor Downer and seconded by Counselor Ball. The council suspend the rules of procedure to allow for the recommendations as set out in item 17. I did it. The staff report CSR 2024 32 Young Street Reconstruction Project dated March 20th, 2024 regarding the bike lanes on Young Street be received, and one, that council directs staff to implement council's desired bike facility option. No, the council directs staff to investigate the possibilities, including risks and benefits of other options of Young Street, including consideration to reverting back to 4 lanes, and the staff consider the cost for extending the multi-use trail. That's it. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The first recommendation, because council chose to split the recommendation, the first recommendation was that the report be received and that council direct staff to implement council's desired bike facility option along Young Street as a part of the Young Street reconstruction project. Now, when that was first read, Mayor Gordon provided the amendment. So now you read the amendment. If council supports the amendment, then number 1 that is set out in the agenda is done and replaced by the amendment. So then we can go to the motion that has number 2 on it.
Okay. I just read the amendment. All those in favor? Carried? Opposed? Okay. Okay. I need a mover and a seconder. Could I have a mover and a seconder for number 2? Counselor East and Mayor Gordon. The council directs staff to implement the desired guidance for 4th Street. All those in favor, or is there any discussion first? Mayor Gordon?
This is one of those ones where the recommendation is to, unless we want to monkey with it, to leave it alone. Unless we want to get into playing one-way street games and having to change all the stuff. The bottom line is the evidence that we've collected through our speed monitoring devices does not support the observations and perceptions of the residents on 4th Street. This has happened more than once in our community where what people feel and experience and live doesn't match up to what the little device says. So the long and short of this recommendation is that we don't mess with this, and that when we do whatever we're going to do to Young Street, that current crosswalk gets pulled out and we turn it into a fully signalized intersection. You know, with pressed across, of course, it's not just going to randomly stop you for no reason. So effectively, this is a status quo with a bonus upgrade that we're going to have a legitimate signalized crossing. That's what's being recommended, just for the public following along. options included us going in and, monkeying around with routes and, moving one ways and whatever, but again, there isn't the evidence to support it. So I'm not trying to dismiss the concerns of our residents on 4th Street who've been very adamant and vocal that there's Dukes of Hazzard style, insanity happening on the street. And I'm not saying it never does, but in all the times that we've sent our staff to capture the information, we're not finding anything that's egregious that would justify making major changes to the flow of traffic in our community on 4th and 5th, where whatever we'd have to do to make one-way streets, because we don't have those really for the most part. So just holistically, that's what we're talking about here. It's a very simple one-liner, but I just wanted to make sure that the residents on 4th Street knew that we weren't trivializing or dismissing their concerns arbitrarily, that there is an upgrade coming. It just may not be what they want. We've dropped the speed to 40, and I don't know what more we can do without evidence to support it. Could it ever be revisited? Could we ever decide to come back later if there is evidence to start making one-way streets and change traffic flow? Absolutely, we could. But at the moment, there isn't any evidence to support that, and that's what this recommendation is saying. Did I accurately paraphrase all your hard work on that report, Mr. Sobel?
That's Deputy Mayor to Mayor Gordon. Yeah, basically, the key point is, we're doing some significant upgrades on Yonge Street, whatever they are. And that intersection's been identified as a need currently to be upgraded. It can be challenging to turn left off of 4th Yonge. So if we are going to go ahead and spend the amount of money that's required to upgrade to a signal, we just want to make sure that 4th ultimately isn't going to be, it could be turned into a one-way street, but depending on the direction it goes, those signals could essentially be useless. If we put signals in and the decision is made for that to be a southbound or northbound only one-way street, there's no need for those signals. So that's really where that, looking for your endorsement, this is where that's driven from. Is we want to sound judgment and use the money, go as far as we can. Signals can cost $300,000 to $400,000. So I don't want to put a $300,000 to $400,000 signal in there if it's not needed, not desired, and plans are going to change.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to 17.3. CSR 2024-33 Strategic Land Use Planning Initiatives 2024 Work Plan. Council reviewed staff report CSR 2024-33 and the recommendations contained therein, and the following motion was presented. COW 2024-14, the staff report CSR 2024-33 Strategic Land Use Planning Initiatives 2024 Work Plan dated March 20th, 2024, be received for information. Oh, you weren't, sorry. Moved by Mayor Gordon and seconded by Councillor McDonald. Thank you. Any discussion? Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. This is like a receive for information one, but I asked that it be put onto this part of the agenda because I didn't want it to just slide through our consent agenda like some of these amazing reports do. Mr. Farquharson, who's been a little under the weather, poor guy's been sitting at home waiting all night for us to get to this one. But this report lays out exactly what our growth trajectory is for the next couple of years. I mean, arguably beyond, because the stuff it does doesn't end, with our term. But all the, the rejigging we've been doing in the municipality with our planning and growth department and the new hires that we have, the amazing new team we have, and all the hard work that, we've done in the past year and a half, rekindling our relationship with developers and settling all kinds of appeals and the litigation and, getting building permits moving, like growth actually happening. I know we're not seeing shovels in the ground, which is aggravating, but that's the economy right now, unfortunately. But there's no bottlenecks at town hall right now. And we are in the good books with the developers. And I wish the premier would give us a growth target because by gone it, we'd be doing it. But we don't have one yet. But this report, which I want to give Mr. Farquharson a chance to speak to, really outlines what's on the hopper for this year, and it's a pretty big list of things, including natural heritage and our waterfront master plan and Midland Bay Landing, just to name a couple or three. And what's also in the plan for 2025. And so again, this is just such an important report for our strategic goals for this term that I really didn't want it to just slide through under consent agenda. So barring any specific questions, maybe Mr. Farquharson, I could ask you to fill in a bunch of blanks and tell us a bit more about this.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to council. I'll give a brief overview, but then I'll actually turn it over to Tomaz, our manager of planning, to go through it. What we wanted to do was we wanted to wait until budget was over so that we knew what our resources were going to be within the department, and then we could figure out how we're going to get some of these projects done that council wants to get done. So you'll see within the report, we've tried to outline, just give a kind of a basic overview and the purpose of what that study is, and then what the budget is that's been allocated towards it. Who's going to be the lead? Is it going to be done in-house? Is it going to be done by consultants? Is it going to be done by both? When are we anticipating to start the project? And then when are we anticipating to complete it? So there is quite a few here. So for example, the waterfront master plan, that was one that was added this time around through the budget. So that's why we wanted to wait until the budget process was over, because we knew that these new projects were going to come forward, and we wanted to make sure that once we knew what our resources were going to be in terms of staffing levels, which ones were a priority that we wanted to make sure that we can get done. Now, if there's a project in here that council feels that we've pushed off until 2025 that they want to see come up earlier, then we can do that. But just keep in mind, that means one of the other projects is going to have to get pushed down just based on resources. So, so perhaps what I'll do, Deputy Mayor, is I'll turn it over to Tomaz, and he can give a brief overview of the report and the projects.
Thank you, Steve, and through Deputy Mayor Post to Council. I'm just going to do a pretty brief overview, just outlining sort of how these strategic initiatives work together. Our goal was really to try to balance addressing issues that are known to Council and the community, while balancing providing strategic direction on matters of community development. And an example of balancing strategic direction and community development. For example, the Natural Heritage Review and the Waterfront Master Plan, those things will provide direction to other initiatives that we do. For example, the Midland Bay Landing RFP will be informed, and we discussed this through our staff report, how it will be informed by, or at least the guiding principles will be informed by the Waterfront Master Plan. The Natural Heritage System Review, of course, is going to be in two phases. We're looking at doing things that we can address in-house, that we as staff can recommend changes on, and try to address things that Council have brought forward to us. And there will also be a more strategic higher visioning exercise that's going to look at the balance of the town's natural heritage system and potentially rejigging some of the town's official plan policies to make them a little bit easier to work with, a little bit easier to understand and implement for staff as well. Also, the way we had organized our initiatives was to focus on things that we knew that we could make good headway on in 2024, as well as pick up any work that's already been started. For example, the County Road 93 secondary plan, there has already been some work started in the scoped area, and we thought it's a good idea to complete that work and then do any work on the remainder of County Road 93 secondary plan alongside with the County Road 93 secondary plan on the south side. And of course, the deferred initiatives were things that we think we wouldn't make good headway on in 2024. So we're recommending that those be pushed on to 2025, potentially beyond. And we note several things. Staffing is one of those things, but also we know that the province has introduced a lot of new legislation in the last year, Bill 109, Bill 23, that have made dramatic changes to the land use policy framework in Ontario. we can't rule that more of that is, we can't rule out that more of that's not going to happen. We actually anticipate that more will come. We don't know what's going to happen with the county structure as well, from an upper tier perspective. So we left some room in there for us to be able to pivot to address those things if they come forward. So that's what I can bring up at this time. Given the report is lengthy, I'm open to discuss any specific issue or initiative. Of course, thank you.
Mayor Gordon?
Thanks. So a couple of the standouts are the Midland Bay Landing RFP preparation. So obviously the most sort of cautionary approach is to complete the waterfront master plan, take the outputs of that to fully inform the RFP, and then do the RFP. However, under, given that we have only a couple years left here, and it takes time for all these things to play out, I like the approach that you're recommending, that we could take the core tenets of that waterfront master plan and use that to inform the RFP. So we're not delaying the RFP by another year, for example. Our goal of, I believe I can speak for council on this, is to pull the trigger on this, get the RFP, get plans back from interested developers, and get them in front of the community to help pick the right one, and get that done before, we go lame duck and can't do anything else this term, so that the new council has very clear direction that we're handing the baton to them and can carry on. That's our goal. And obviously the longer we take to, craft this RFP, the less likely it is of us achieving that goal. So I like the, this creative approach you're taking, where the two are going to work in tandem, and then, effectively hand off to the RFP process. So I'm looking forward to that. And secondly, the one thing that isn't on here, but I know it's just a tiny little micro sliver, is that little tiny home pilot from Habitat for Humanity that council's being pitched. And we're waiting to hear back on candidate lands, what the cost is, of course, and what kind of planning hocus pocus needs to be done to allow for some kind of site-specific zoning changes to allow for this to happen for the pilot. Knowing that, the broader allowance, unless the government shakes the snow globe again, which it sounds like it might, because now there's the quads, apparently. But that broader zoning bylaw review, which would then contemplate the kinds of properties where little tiny home type communities could be installed, wouldn't be seen until 2025-ish. So I just want some assurance that even though it's not listed on here, because it is kind of just a little minor thing, but major in its potential for our community and other communities, quite frankly, across Canada, we'd be a leader in doing something like this, that there's still room in your plan to deal with this little mini project if council gave the blessing to donate or lease some land to this, the proponents, and allow for them to put a little cluster of tiny homes hooked up to our municipal services. There's still capacity to do that, even though it's not written in this report.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Council, Mayor Gordon, yes, we left room in our capacity to be able to pivot to address things as they come up. Housing, of course, is a strategic initiative for the town. So yes, we would be able to facilitate discussions with, interested parties as directed by council, to be able to respond to things. And I do want to point out that we do have a housekeeping amendment or zoning by housekeeping to be done. And that is going to be a town-wide initiative. So we'll be looking at clarifying definitions and, providing, a little bit more direction on things as needed.
Thanks. If I couldn't follow up, the last one being natural heritage. Of course, that's been a bone I've been chewing on for a while now. I know it's a big job. It's not as simple as just erasing natural heritage off of our official planning, going, hey, here we are back to where we were. Because clearly there are areas in our community that are well deserving of natural heritage protection. But there's also the acknowledgement that we were a little overzealous in our application of natural heritage, and it's encumbering growth effectively and development. So I know it's a big job. I really appreciate that you guys are, quite frankly, we got you to come on board to help us with this, amongst many other things. And I guess I wasn't quite sure from reading the staged approach you're taking, whether the small homeowner who happened to have, a bunch of extra acreage in the back of their lot that's currently seized as natural heritage, maybe deservedly, probably not, and they are prohibited from severing that off and either selling it or, putting another house on it, or selling it to a developer and putting a little apartment building. They can't do any of that without front loading all the studies and the plans and the costs. So I'm just wondering, we seem to be looking at the large acreage to go first. And of course, your team is already working on a developer by developer basis and addressing these issues to move development forward. And you've already made that several times now in the past year, which is awesome. But I'm thinking for the small people that are just landowners in our community around Wood Point and other places that have contacted us, concerned that they're seized basically with this. Is there any ability for the small people, the little people that aren't ready to engage big developers, to have their, properties looked at what appears to be phase 2 right now, but kind of moved into phase 1 if they're interested in moving on something? I just like to give them some hope that it's not like a few years away.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Mayor Gordon. So the goal of the phase approach is actually in phase 1 to address what you're referring to, is to identify any built up area of the town that have natural heritage, pockets, islands, overlaps, potentially just erroneous mapping or application of mapping, and just review those where there's already development had occurred. That would be our first area to look. And phase 2 would look at areas that have not been developed. And for example, County Road 93, west of County Road 93, where the town, there's a significant amount of forested land. We would, as part of phase 2 natural heritage system review, we would look at those. So the individual homeowners who may have a deeper lot and have natural heritage land use designation on them, phase 1 would essentially look at potentially redesignating that property, but leaving an overlay so that there is a process to ensure that there is no species at risk and things like that. So there's some evaluation, but they wouldn't have to go through an official plan amendment to remove that, which being a lower tier than that has to go to the county for approval, and it's a complex system or process. So we're looking at identifying areas where we could potentially alleviate the planning burden on folks while maintaining environmental protection at some level.
Okay, so I had it backwards. So it is phase 1. That's the one I wanted to go after first, because that's the low hanging fruit. Because I know the bigger developers you're already working with and making it happen, right? We've already seen that several times now. That's awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. When will we know when these little landowners, like what's the methodology for them to contact the town and begin to initiate this if they want? Or is it too soon to kind of hang out the contact us at this email to get naturalheritagenoffmyproperty.com or something registered?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Mayor Gordon, we don't have a timeframe put together just yet. We're just waiting until everything is, the dust settles on our report and make sure that every initiatives that we recommend move forward. And we would put together a public consultation strategy for all of these initiatives. And there would be webpage emails and things like that set up so individuals can contact us and let us know. There'll likely be like a public information center or an open house where folks can come to us and ask us questions, because I'm sure there's going to be concerns also from the residents about, you're not just lifting natural heritage, you want to make sure that there's protection. So there is going to be a process for people to, for staff to collect feedback from residents and stakeholders.
Thank you. No further questions.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you to Mr. Wiska, or however you, sorry, I apologize. How do you pronounce your last name?
Wiersba.
Weirsa. I like it. I have one couple of questions and then one comment, please. The first question is in regards to the list of the strategic land use planning initiatives. Is our list on that page 2 of your report a priority list? It starts with the natural heritage and then the Midland Bay landings. And I'm just curious if those have the most priority in that order. No.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Councillor McDonald. Not necessarily. They would be better grouped together how they relate to each other. For example, the waterfront master plan is to go ahead of Midland Bay landing RFP, or at least together. So we purposely didn't put them this way, or in a way that's number 1, number 2, number 3, because we were anticipating that council may have opinions on that. So there's also matters related to can we get a consultant in time to be able to do certain work? And what we didn't want to say, yes, we're going to do this work and then not be able to retain a consultant to help us with that. So I would suggest that the way we have described the work from pages 2 onwards probably describes best how we would like the programs to unfold.
Thank you. And my second question is in regards to a statement under the housing needs. You're proposing that we need an assessment on the housing affordability and the needs in town of Midland. We know there's a housing need, so there's been tons of assessments out there by the, well, I'm referring specifically to the Simcoe County Health Unit. So why don't we just jump right into the strategic plan, because we know the needs there? And then I'll make my comment.
That's a great question, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor McDonald. The way we've discussed the housing needs assessment, we are aware that Councillor Ball had made a comment during budget that we need to be looking to work with other stakeholders or other organizations to collect information. At this time, I don't have certainty that the information that is available out there will address the town of Midland needs. There is very specific studies done by certain groups to address certain needs of the housing continuum, and a housing needs assessment done by Midland for Midland would help us be very targeted. So at this time, we don't know. However, if there is information out there, we would leverage that information from whoever we can and perhaps reflect the cost savings to the municipality, and we will do that. At this time, we wanted to also advise council how we envision a housing needs assessment to unfold and what it would do. If we can collect that information and not have to retain a consultant and leverage existing information, we will do that.
My comment is on the your last sentence in your report. In a way that balances protecting the environment, managing growth, and ensuring Midland remains an attractive place to live and invest. I'm sure you have the support of all of council on that statement. Thank you.
Councillor Ball?
I shouldn't speak for all.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you for referring to that, because I think that having another meeting maybe to follow up that there is room to collect that data on a Midland level. So I'll continue to follow up, and Catherine McDonald as well, because we do have an avenue towards that might be more cost effective. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and I'm glad to know that we're on the same page to go forward.
Councillor Meredith?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick comment. Most of my questions have been answered. I love the report. I love the budget slated towards that different areas, putting a dollar budgeted amount towards that. And I love the information in it. So thank you very much for the report, Mr. Farquharson and Mr. Wiersba. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? You've heard the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we're at 17.4. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Ball. And Councillor East. Is it? No. One second. Just confirming with the clerk. We're 17.4 right now. Okay, 17.4 CSR 2024 remuneration and expenses paid to members of council and local boards 2023. Council reviewed staff report CSR 2024 28 and the recommendations contained therein, and the following motion was presented. The staff report CSR 2024 28 remuneration and expenses paid to members of council and local boards 2023 dated March 20th, 2024 be received for information. I believe that Councillor Emeritus may have pulled this. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. I just had, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just had a question on the remuneration for Midland Bay Landing. Those figures that were presented, where is it here? Yeah, 7,050. Are they, I don't recall anything in 2023, any work being done in 2023. So where did those figures come from, unless it was a lapse from 2022? And I believe there was more than 3 people on the board. Are they not gotten paid, or were they paid in 2022?
Through Deputy Mayor Prost to Councillor Emeritus. So there were 4 board members, you're correct. The 4th member did not accept any remuneration in 2023. As you're aware, the board did resign in very early 2023. I believe they had sort of one meeting where that resignation took place. Those payments were not for 2022 services. They were for 23, and they were made early in the year prior to that resignation. So the board member who's not showing up on that list was also paid at the same time, but because of the resignation, didn't feel that compensation was appropriate and returned it to the town. So his name is not on there.
Okay, thank you. I just thought, I couldn't recall, other than the resignation, for the amount of 7,050. Is that what they got? If this was one meeting, is this what that was paid per meeting, pretty much to the board?
So I believe their compensation was split into 2 payments. So this would have been sort of the first payment of the year, and then they would receive another payment later on in the year. So for example, in 2022, the total remuneration was 23,000, and so it is a fraction of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Gordon?
I can just fill in the blanks too for the question marks. Both Deputy Mayor Cotton and I were on that board. And at the first board meeting, we both declined any compensation for that. So that's why you don't see our numbers on there. Just so you know.
Yeah, yes, I did know that. I just didn't see Mr. Kernahan's on here, so that's why I was just asking.
Any more comments or questions? You've heard the motion. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor East. Councillor Ball. That staff report CSR 2024 29, 2024 composite fees and charges bylaw dated March 20th, 2024 be received, and 1, that the composite fees and charges schedule attached to report CSR 2024 29 be approved, and that the 2024 composite fees and charges bylaw be brought forward for council's consideration. Do we have any comments or questions? Mayor Gordon?
Just a quick note that for the people following along, this is the one Councillor Downer declared a conflict on, so he won't be participating, but he's still present, so. Which is not a problem, just making sure I mention that for continuity's sake. And I don't really have any other comments on this other than, it's just projected at going up about 5% across the board. We have made a couple of tweaks tonight, and there's stuff that still needs to be brought back and worked into it when we make decisions about fees and cost recovery for the rec center, whether that's through direct compensation from neighboring municipalities, or, if they don't want to do that, then from the users themselves. So there's a few things that are going to need to be shoehorned into this at some point, but what staff are asking us for clarity on, because we need to start charging these fees, is for council's blessing to move ahead with these fees, subject to any other changes we want to make on here.
Any further comments or questions? Councilor Meredith?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just looking at some of the fees and some that are kind of like the NSSRC that are still kind of in limbo. I just wanted to clarify that all the fees in the North Simcoe Sports Record, are they under evaluation? Or is it just the user fee group here right now is why the delay is?
Through Deputy Mayor to Council Meredith. Yeah, as you can see in all user fees, with the exceptions of the bar fees there and the new cancellation fees, all other fees are right now on hold.
Just a follow up. So when we're reviewing these fees, is anybody from the NSSRC involved in input on what the fees should be? I know that I play pickleball at the rec center, and the fees are extremely low for the gym use, in my opinion. I don't work there. It's not my expertise. I just feel they're low for what I get. Is that type of conversation, is that going to be discussed with management, or does it just come from upper tier, or how does those fees are become determined? Thank you.
Through Deputy Mayor. Like all fees, there's management staff, et cetera, are always involved in those discussions. They happen annually. When a draft fees and charges bylaw is being put together by staff. So of course, staff on the ground level, especially management level, are always involved in those discussions. And as part of the exercise that council has directed staff to proceed with around the rest of the user fees, which have all been, again, marked here as sort of on hold, gym fees would be one that would be looked at as well. So it will be really all fees that you see here, with those two exceptions I noted earlier, that will be under review. And really, to update on that, we've made some good progress, and we're sort of looking at, we've determined staff have decided a way forward, given the direction from council, look to bring in a third-party facilitator to facilitate a discussion where the heads of council, CAOs, and some user group, presidents or board members are all participating and a part of. And again, have that discussion led by a third-party facilitator to try to get to some answers and some options around supplementary funding, as was directed by council. So we're looking to do that around mid-April.
And one follow up. So your target date for something coming back to council would be sometime in May, or is it after the break?
Through Deputy Mayor, would be before the break is the goal. You know, again, I think we're on having that facilitated discussion mid-April is makes that goal pretty reasonable. I think we should be able to get it before the break.
I don't see any. Oh, Mayor Gordon.
Councilor Meredith reminded me of this. So for those following along on the do we keep our liquor license or not saga, although it may have seemed like we'd made a decision, we haven't. The jury is still out. We are taking another sober second thought, as it were, to review the facts to make sure that, you know, we come up with the right decision because, you know, Councillor Meredith was pretty passionate about and but has a lot of experience in the fact that we shouldn't be, you know, maybe taking the bath that we are operating that, and that there is some net benefit to maintaining that, even, you know, albeit with the risk that comes with having that. So the fact that it's being revisited with staff and our stakeholders is, you know, just another example of engagement and, you know, not ruling over our tenants and users and residents, but, you know, governing with them. So that will be coming back to us too in a report. So we can watch for that consultation too. So we got parking out to tender basically with the public. We got the staggering cost of running our sports and rec center out for consultation with the actual consumers who use the most of it, not just the people that go once or twice, but the people that use it every day in, day out. They're all going to be at the table coming up with a plan that works. And we have the alcohol policy being revisited. And then, you know, the biggie is going to be the RFP for Midland Bay Landing. So there's a whole lot of opportunity for the community and stakeholders to be engaged in the decisions we make, that they're not just being made on reports that come to us and, you know, wanted to get the voting out of the way so we can get back to the hot tub or the Jays game or the Blue or the Leafs. So I think it's really important just to remind folks that the decisions are being made with you, not to you. And that's our objective. So I'm really happy to see this. It's a good news story, and I'm looking forward to the output of these meetings and what no one's going to leave these things with a big smiley face. I understand that because there's costs, but at least everyone will have had a voice at the table and maybe come up with a different way of thinking that we hadn't thought of, that'll find a good compromise that meets the needs of our ratepayers, this corporation, and our residents altogether, and our visitors, no less too. Our neighbors are important to us. So I just wanted to toss in that extra little bit for you, Councilor Meredith, that comes coming back.
Thank you for the warning. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It just not to muddy the waters, but in regards to the first part of the motion, that we're going to agree to the fees and charges to the schedule attached, except for the one that we just passed on the patio. How does that work? For clarification.
Madam CAO.
Through the deputy mayor to Councillor McDonald, we could add the words as amended onto the recommendation.
I wrote it on. Do you want me to read it again? Okay, seeing no more hands up for questions or comments, all in favor? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor, if I may, just before, Councillor McDonald did note earlier today as well, they're under fire and emergency services. We do have a duplication in there for training. And one training we caught, so we did increase it by 5%. The other line actually just needs to be removed. And so that one we didn't up, which is why she caught it. So just asking council if it's okay if we also make that friendly amendment to remove that second training line that was an error. And so we'll do that as part of those amendments as well. Thank
Do
you.
you want me to add that into the motion?
I don't think it's necessary. I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Mover and a seconder. Mayor Gordon. Councillor Bald. The staff report CSR 2024-35, MLE 2023 year-end summary dated March 20th, 2024, be received for information. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. I did ask that this report be pulled to allow the opportunity to provide more detail on the statement on page 2. I'm not even there yet. The request for services statement. It says, well, the staff is going, first of all, if I may, that the staff is going to take an education-based approach. Could you enlighten me on what an education-based approach is?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Councillor McDonald. Generally in municipal law enforcement in the town of Midland, we take an education approach, in order to obtain compliance. Now, we don't necessarily do that with parking, but most of the other bylaws, we try to educate, let them know, because sometimes people don't know they're in contravention, and provide that education and customer service. And in that section of that report, we were just trying to highlight that, we are seeing an increased demand for the services we provide. So we were just trying to highlight that.
Follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the report. The numbers, were they as compiled from the service, what does our card say? Where people call in or just email their concern in? And my other question is the number of property standard and clean yards. If you're given a concern about a yard not being up to standard or clean, how is that? Could you educate me on how you approach it, how long the people have, and how often do you go back? In that particular sense, I'd like to be more educated.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Councillor McDonald. The calls come in a variety of ways. They can email them in, call, attend town hall. So that there is various ways. So that encompasses all of those. In terms of property standards, when we receive a complaint, we'll do some research on the property before attending, see if there's a history, or sometimes even if we go into our tax software, we'll do some research there just to find out, because, as we have negative interactions, we'll note that just for officer safety, to be aware of. But yeah, we always knock on the door, leave a business card if no one's home, try to make contact with the owner, educate them on what the issue is. If we feel we can get compliance with just a verbal warning, that will suffice. If it's a more serious matter, we will issue a 21-day property standards order and allow them time to make the repairs. For something like long grass or refuse and debris, the time frame would be shorter than that 21 days. And then we do have the ability to cost recover, do that work if they fail to do it, and recover that through taxes.
Thank you. Just one more question. Where could I get a description of what the Town of Midland's Property Standard and Clean Yards Act or standard is? Like if I see something that concerns me personally, maybe my standards are higher than Town of Midland's, how would I be able to clarify that?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Councillor McDonald. If you go on our website, I believe it's the Town Hall tab, and then to bylaws, property standards will be there, and you can review the bylaw, or feel free to give us a call and let us know what the concern is, and we can look it up for you as well. But in terms of the standards, a property maintenance bylaw is a minimum maintenance standards. So like you said, your standards may be different than others. It is a minimum standard that people need to keep their properties up to.
Thank you.
Mayor Gordon.
While we're on the topic of property standards, people may have seen an op-ed that was in the Midland today, I think it was yesterday, where some of the content that I'd posted on a social media or my webpage, just reminding people about property standards in town, got quoted. And I just wanted to echo that it's very important. Our system right now is done on a reactive approach, meaning somebody's got to basically burn a buddy and rat out your neighbor or call in the couches that are sitting out by Dairy Queen on Yonge and 8th. They've been out there for 2 weeks or longer. It is, unfortunately, that's the way our system works. And I've been talking to Mr. Smiley about this, and I'd like to try and revamp the way our bylaw works so we're more proactive. So when we drive around town and see things and take note and go out and do exactly as Mr. Smiley does, carrot first. Hey, bring your junk into your house or go pay to take it to the dump or whatever, right? Don't leave it on town property. Or stick comes next. That's when we come in with our trucks and we'll pick it up and they'll get a bill. It'll be expensive if our guys have to put gloves on and touch it. So that kind of enforcement to be more proactive and less reactive is important to me. There's a cost to doing that. But it's one that I think the town would benefit from. So you've heard me say this before, and Mr. Smiley has too. We've had plenty of calls. And I'll tell you, I'm responsible for some of that percentage increase because I put tickets in just like any resident does using service at midland.ca. He knows because he gets them from me as I drive around, or people complain to me, I go look, right? Or they send me pictures. I ask them to put the ticket in, or I'll do it for them sometimes as if it's an elderly folk. But we got to get our town looking a little better. If you can afford to have stuff, then you darn well can afford to get rid of that stuff when you don't want it anymore. So just putting your junk out, like Andrew Phillips nailed it completely in his article the way he wrote it. It was awesome. I think I even wrote a little letter to the editor thanking him for it. But that's exactly the right thing. So we have a department, we have trained people, they go to school and get educated on how to be by these special enforcement powers for property standards. Mr. Smiley is a certified expert at this. And I think we got one more. Who is? Mr. Smiley, or is it just you? Property standards.
Just me for now. Graham Haley is going through the training, and he will be up to speed probably next year, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's a big deal. It's not like teaching people how to write a parking ticket, right? There's a lot to know on this. And to his point, those bylaws, both ones you mentioned, Councillor McDonald, are on the town's website and searchable, and you can see what the rules are on it. It is a little hard when it's just one guy, but we're working, Mr. Smiley, and the numbers show it. So I've been telling people to report things, get it in the system. Don't just moan about it, put it in the system. If we fail to respond after it's in the system, now that's something that I can do something about. We can do something about, because that's a failure of us following our own policies. So it's important to get the data. And so the data is there. It's happening. So I'm not going to take full responsibility for it. I'm sure all of you are doing the same thing, directing people to the ticket system, but that's good to see. I'm good with carrot, but I don't want to see a bag of carrots. It's going to maybe be 2 carrots and then out comes a stick. I know it's a little work putting together the briefs and, laying the paper, but that's what sends the message to people. And there's only a few people in our community that are sort of repeat offenders. I can think, I'm going to say it right now. You drive into town, the first thing you see at 12 and 93 is a junkyard. I don't know who owns that house. And if you want to call me and chew me out later, my phone number is well published. But that is an absolute disgrace. And it's the first thing people see when they're coming into our community. And it's been allowed to be like that for years. I know we've addressed them to some degree, but it got better for a bit. And now it's even worse again. So that's the kind of mess that just we can't tolerate as a community. If we allow that to happen, we lose the moral authority to write tickets and complain about somebody's grass that's too high if we let that continue in our community. So if you're owner of that property that I just shamed you with publicly, get a hold of me and let's have a conversation about the state of it and what's likely going to happen if things aren't done. It's not acceptable. So we have a few properties in town that, qualify for maybe stick now after carrot. And I'm going to strongly encourage and continue to log tickets as any resident can, that we get on these things because, again, we lose the moral authority if we just allow this stuff to happen. It's like speed limits that are never enforced. So I know Mr. Smiley is a one-man band right now when it comes to property standards. There's only so much you can do, and we're tasking with rewriting a bunch of our bylaws. But his team's growing. We're going to have to fund growing his team, quite frankly. And as soon as we get that second person that's certified, we will have doubled our capacity for property standards. Which, if they're not writing parking tickets, we may as well attack our property standards issues. So anyway, that's my little soapbox rant. I know you're doing what you can, Mr. Smiley. And your department is small and trying to be mighty. And we'll have to do more to try and bolster your efforts if we keep raising our expectations. So carry on. I'm not trying to be critical of you at all. I'm calling out things that everybody sees in our community. And it's frustrating that things take so long, but they do. So I liked this report. Thanks for the transparency on it. I'm glad to see the numbers increasing. I've also noticed the taxi, since you started doing the compliance with the taxis, they were looking like jalopies during COVID. Like it was just actually disgraceful, but I understand they couldn't get parts. That's obviously be remedied or whatever you're doing, working with them. They look great now. And it's not embarrassing to say it's a Midland taxi in front of you. Carry on. I think this report speaks volumes for your small department and let us know, continue to let us know, not just at budget time, but in the middle of the year, what we can do to help support you as we keep piling work on you.
Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you to Mr. Smiley. The report is great. Thank you for the report, first of all. The numbers on I see the revenues for the parking. I don't see any data on revenues for the remainder of bylaws, such as property standards, et cetera. Is there any way we can get a breakdown? Probably not today, but I did actually put this question in. I think for Monday, you might have some numbers for me. But in future reports, can we get all revenue streams that bylaw takes in, similar to the parking revenue breakdown and so forth? And then if we can have a cost ratio, a staff time cost ratio with those associated with the breakdowns, basically to see that we're not continually increasing, going into debt or into negative losses in the bylaw department. I also would like to see this report instead of yearly, quarterly, so that we're on top of where we are with revenues versus expenses. Trying to get to a revenue neutral. That gap would be, the less losses we have in revenue. It's one of our major revenue streams, and I'm sure that it's going to increase big time when it comes in. The parking program comes in. But I know you have made adjustments because the parking program is on hold for 2024. So that correlation between revenues, for all areas in bylaw would be helpful for me anyways, to see where where we are at in our bylaw, you know, either in the positive or the negative. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, Post to Council members. Yeah, we did receive a question. We do have that information for you. If, we could put it up on the board.
Sorry, Mr.
Sorry,
Smiler,
no.
we can't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry. Can you able to hear me?
It's just digital garble. I don't know if your internet signal, your video is fine, but your audio is acting wacky.
All right. All right, through you, Deputy Mayor Prost, to Councillor Meredith, am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we did pull those numbers. So the total revenue for bylaw was $194,000. 172,000 of that was from parking revenues. So about 22,000 more in terms of other bylaws and stuff. And we also put the staff time there that you wanted. So yeah, and those other things that we collect revenue on are like from cost recovery for property standards. You know, the dog tag revenues. Obviously with parking, it was the fines from tickets we've issued, as well as the parking meter revenues, as well as when tickets go to court. And we spoke about the taxi driver inspections, and there's a fee for that, as well as the driver fees. And then we do a lot of refreshment vehicles. Obviously, that's coming up with the butter tart coming up. We do, I think we did about 130 last year, and we're anticipated to do closer to 150 this year, I think. And we've talked about the patio program, as well as you know, some other licensing like hawker and peddler, as well as the farmers market, which will be moving lots this year. Yeah, if you have any questions on the chart above, feel free to ask.
It's hard for me to just take that all in right now. So I'd like a copy of it if that's possible, but this would be very helpful maybe in the next quarter if I have to make an amendment to this to receive these reports quarterly. No, we can, but that would be great to have included with this parking report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Prost, through to Councillor Meredith. Bylaw does provide the monthly reports, and they're provided on the CIP. So I'm not sure if, because they're providing monthly, if you need the quarterly.
I don't. I did talk to our CFO prior to the meeting. The monthly will not. Well, I guess I could add up the numbers at quarterly, I guess. And it's just not going to be brought up to council, I guess, the report, and or if there is any discussion or type of you know, go ahead.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Meredith. The CIPs are always on the agendas. So if you see that there's a monthly, now we're a week behind because of the agenda and the way we publish them. But if you see a monthly building report and you want to discuss it, then we can take it off of the consent, because all the CIP items are on consent. So you can address it at council.
Great, you're right. Thank you. Missed that one. So in this report going forward, we'll have the full report as we just saw the numbers come up on the screen, will that all be provided in the future CIPs?
Through Councillor Prost to Councillor Maris. My only amendment to that would be that we would provide the financials quarterly.
On the CIP, correct? Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'm happy with that.
Any other comments or questions? You've heard the motion. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, on to number 18, notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to 19. General announcements. Does anybody have any general announcements besides Mayor Gordon? Go ahead, Mayor Gordon.
I'm always good for two. So I'm getting on my right screen so I can see it. Couple ones, March 18th, I know, which is a couple days ago. Still a pretty big day for us. It was the National Transit Worker Appreciation Day, and God knows we appreciate our transit workers. On Monday, the town of Midland proclaimed the Transit Workers Appreciation Day, and along with all Canadians right across Canada, celebrated the important contributions of our transit workers who keep our communities moving. I would just want to give a big thank you once again to our Midland Penetang transit staff, who continue to provide this vital transportation service in our community for both Midland and Penetang residents. And the fact that our staff will be able to rework these, whenever we have to renew these agreements, we do. We work so well together with our neighbor in Penetang to deliver this service. And just today, I wish I had the card with me. Right now, it's up on my desk, but I'm going to copy it and send it to council. I had a resident, an elderly resident, send me a handwritten card. A lot of stuff I get's handwritten. This was in pencil, no less, but beautifully written. Clearly, she made the card herself. And she wrote into council thanking us for the free seniors transit and how absolutely critical that is. She doesn't have a car. And this is how she gets around to get her groceries. And she just wanted to let us know how important, I'm assuming it was triggered by the announcement on Monday, how important the transit is to her living in town. So I'll share all that with you. You guys can read it yourselves, but just expressing that sentiment, it's something we don't always hear. A lot of times the stuff we get is negative, but I do get a lot of these thank you things, and I try and share them as I get them. So to that resident, thank you for writing in, and we're glad and proud to be able to provide this service for you. And it's very clear that it's heavily subsidized, right? We charge nothing for seniors, but typically it would cost you like $2 or $3 to take the bus. In reality, I think the math is if you take the cost of operating transit divided by the number of riders, it's like, I don't know, 60 or 80 bucks or something per rider. It's not inexpensive to run a transit service in a small community like this. So partnering with Penetang is one of the ways we do it. The gas tax, which isn't called the gas tax anymore, is another big deal. And we just got an announcement that our gas tax, not gas tax, but whatever it's called, has increased. Did I tell you that? Oh, okay. I shared it with the CAO. All right. It actually went up a little bit instead of down. So praise the Lord. We're not talking like materially, but it went up. So, that helps offset the cost of running our transit system. And I'm always happy to receive these little gifts from the province in my inbox. So transit, we love transit. It's very expensive to operate. We don't take that for granted. And it's heavily subsidized, but it's also heavily used, even though you don't see people standing room only on our buses. It is consistently used by people who need to take the bus because there's no other option for them. Second announcement, on Friday, March 22nd, the town will proclaim World Water Day, which is a day that's set aside for the worldwide, to focus on the importance of fresh water. And it goes without saying, one would think, but there's actually a day for it. The United Nations 2024 World Water Day theme is leveraging water for peace. I'd like to speak more in depth about that, but I haven't read what that means. I could think of some jokey things I could say right now, but I don't want to make fun of it. We thank our water and wastewater staff here in Midland for ensuring we have ample, clean drinking water in the community. And clean being the the word in bolds and italics. Matter of fact, I just became a landlord. I know a lot of people said I'm nuts. I should have just sold the house. But I have a new tenant who just moved in our community. And she's a new vet in our community, like a veterinarian. And the first question she asked when I was showing her around the house was, can we drink the tap water in Midland? And I'm like, hell yeah, you can drink the tap water. No, it doesn't smell funny. Doesn't taste like worms or dirt. And it's probably the cleanest stuff you can get, short of, going to Tiny and drinking what's coming right out of God's green earth. And that is 100% due to the amazing work done by our water wastewater team. And, there's probably some divine intervention too, because the source water is clean to start with. So at any rate, March 22nd, World Water Day, and Midland's water is second to none. And that'll be our day to celebrate that. So there's my 2 announcements. No, there's not a flag raising, just a proclamation, which will go out as a, an email blast and a media blast.
Does anybody else have any announcements? Seeing none, we can move on. Number 20, motion to close committee of the whole and to resume formal council session. That the committee of the whole rise and report. It's moved by Councillor Downer and seconded by Councillor Meredith. All in favor? Carried. Mayor Gordon.
Thank you very much. Did a great job. That was actually a rather complex committee of the whole today, because we had some, like monkey wrenches in the gears. So you did it. Good for you. So moved by Councillor Bald, seconded by Councillor East, that the recommendations of the committee of the whole for the meeting of March 20th, 2024 be adopted as resolutions of council. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Next, we have a motion for which notice was given. This is moved by Councillor Ball, seconded by somebody to get it on the floor. Councillor East. That the guest house shelter be permitted to use and maintain snow removal of 2 parking spots in the municipal parking lot at the rear of the guest house shelter. Councillor Ball, take it away.
Thank you. So the guest house shelter operates emergency services. They currently park in our municipal lot, which does not allow for overnight parking. They were using the Lab X Media parking lot in previous years, but their snow removal company does not allow for them to use that overnight anymore. It's unfortunate, and it's something I think that we as a town need to look at, because we need a shelter in our town, and at the end of the day, we need to provide the parking that is not only close, but also safe for them to walk to their cars at night and be able to monitor. I know that people are going to say that there's probably a precedent to allowing them to use these parking spots. There's a lot of other businesses that are open late downtown, so that I believe this is different than those, because this is an emergency shelter and it can't run if the employees of that emergency shelter can't operate or park their car overnight without being ticketed. So that's my 2 cents on that. And hopefully, if you have any comments, let me know.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, my 2 cents is probably exactly what you thought. I do realize that the shelter needs somebody there overnight, but it is a precedent we'd be setting. And we even have like a downtown bakery that needs to start at maybe 4 a.m. And that's where they're making their living and, taking care of their families. So one's not necessarily more important than the other. I think we would be setting a precedent that wouldn't go over well if we do for one and not the other, because everybody's important.
Sorry, Ms. Ellery. I was looking right over top of you. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Ball, I just have one comment that I wanted to make the council aware of. The guest house shelter already is utilizing at least 1, if not 2 parking spots in that parking lot. for their garbage dumpster. So we need to be aware of that. And then we also have a bylaw for overnight parking during the winter, for which they could be ticketed. So you may want to consider looking at, if council wants to consider this, there would have to be something that would give them some kind of exemption from that bylaw. But right now, they would be contravening that overnight parking bylaw in the winter. Perhaps Mr. Flannery could speak more to the whole snow removal process and the fact that it would probably hinder the town's mechanics and vehicles getting in there to do a good job at cleaning out that parking lot. But they already do have one, if not two, just the way they've positioned that dumpster in that parking lot that is for their personal use only.
Mr. Flannery, anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, correct. They do have two-ish spots sort of already taken up. To the deputy mayor's point, I would agree it can be precedent setting. It quite frankly, regardless of which spots, if council were to pass this, we'd have to determine which spots, but at the end, the comment would be the same. It would disrupt our staff from safely being able to do their job at night. These lots are plowed overnight on purpose because they're empty. It's much safer to do that. You know, and where snow storage is kept, et cetera, matters. You know, it isn't always just as simple as, well, they'll bring in their own contractor to do those two spots. Well, then the vehicles have to be moved. How long does that take? The logistics of it always, it often can sound simple, and it isn't quite necessarily so. Yeah, and of course, it just adds it adds difficulty and would add time to our operators doing their job.
Councilor McDonald.
No one will deny the fact that the service that the guest house shelter is a very much needed service in Midland, and it's a special service. And as a counselor, I would like to be able to assist them in providing their service the best we can. We're pretty creative when it comes to needing something, and I do believe we could be creative in creating and finding a spot to help them in the overnight parking. Yes, the bakery does have to start at 4 o'clock in the morning, but they probably have a private parking spot at their bakery already. It's not, we don't have another guest house setting. It's assisting a very needed service. I don't think it's setting precedent, and I think we should be able to reach out and help them. That won't cost us a lot of money, but will provide a lot of moral and assistance by showing we care.
Councilor Ball.
Thank you. Yeah, just a follow up to that to shed a little more light. What the parking spots that they would be looking at using are directly behind the garbage bins that they're there. And we did approve those. We did give them those spots. So all of this conversation we had around the garbage bins, and we did grant them those spaces. So I believe that it is the same. The conversation is the same. The risk is the same. The ability to clear around it is the same as it would be with the bins. And we did grant them those. So they can't run a shelter for Midland's population without being able to park overnight. It's just that simple. They'll have to close their doors if we're going to ticket them every night.
Councilor Meredith.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. I can, you know, I see both sides here. Mr. Flannery, you know, with cars being parked overnight, and I've had it at my properties downtown where apartment buildings in the downtown core. In the summertime, they're fine because they either buy a permit or use the parking lots for free right now. In the wintertime, there's, vehicles that magically appear in my lots, and I'm scrambling every from complaints from the tenants that and not only that, coming after a snowfall, and there's this car that hasn't moved in 3 or 4 days, snow all around it, and it can be problematic. I don't have the confidence in the guest house shelter, the management there, to keep and maintain these parking spots clear at all times, based on previous record of other requests we've had. So at this time, based on that information, I would have to be opposed to this. Thank you.
I'll weigh in if I could. So I've been a strong advocate for the guest house shelter in managing expectations and also holding them accountable, both at the county level and here for shortcomings. It was Councillor Prost and I or then Councillor Prost and I who visited their facility and came up with this idea of getting the garbage off of Elizabeth and using this dumpster idea, putting on municipal property. And council was kind enough to grant that. We also gave them this ability to encroach on our property and build this, shelter behind their building as a place for people to sit, rather than out in the open, where they could sit and smoke or whatever they do behind the fence, like anybody does behind their fence. There was a little drama around that because we approved a patio, but they erected a roof and did things without a building permit, which then triggered our building officials to go and give them a spanking and had to go get the building permit, have to do it properly. So I mean, sometimes things don't always go as planned with the guest house, and I understand it's a dynamic, and they're doing their best and struggling. But I would argue that we have given them some decent precedents already. They had a relationship with LabX that I'll tell you, quite frankly, soured because of the mess, primarily, on Elizabeth, which is not gone, even though that there's a dumpster in the back. And the fact that a lot of their residents and guests linger and hang out right there in the boardroom for LabX is staring right at them all day. And they have bigwig customers coming in and they're looking at that. So, the relationship soured. The CIO and I went and had a meeting with LabX. I'm not going to suggest that directly led to you're not parking on our property at night, but I think there's probably a nexus between the two. I suggested to Nathan when he spoke to me about this earlier this year that he do what anybody does who's in this need, and that's approach some of the other parking lots in close proximity. I know there's a business right across the street on First that has a pretty deep parking lot. My wife used to rent an office in there. There's one or two guys that work under the place. Maybe flip them $100 a month or whatever the magic number is, and they're parking right there across the street on private property. Or look at, there's a rental building right on the other corner. There's options for them aside from, painting us into a corner, having to make yet another exception on this parking lot, which then puts us at real conflict for other people who could easily make a case that they serve greater good as well, or that they live downtown and can't even park their car. And that's how they get to work and they can't feed their family and they need a parking space now. I'm all for compromises and, we do make exceptions. Council does that. Look, big part of our job is making exceptions to the rule, but we can't always make exceptions to the rule, especially when there are viable alternatives. The path of least resistance for the guest house is for us to give them 2 spots or X number of spots. That is the path of least resistance. And I don't begrudge him for coming and asking for this again through you. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can't support this because there's other options that haven't been explored because we're the path of least resistance. And, there's also the, a bit of guilt involved over the guest house shelter, help us out. I don't think they're going to close because of this, but it is an inconvenience for their staff. And I think they need to put on the thinking cap and canvass their neighbors and get some parking on someone else's land so that we don't have to open the can of worms and tell other people in our community that we're going to pick guest house. They're specialer than, your needs as a business owner or a resident downtown. Notwithstanding the some of the issues with clearing snow, and then you have a private contractor on our property, you know, he's trying to plow the snow on our lot. He gets out of his car because his blade's jammed, trips and falls. Now he's suing us and he's working on our property. Like, I'm just going down the stupid liability rabbit hole that always encumbers us. But again, if there was no other reason, no other way, I might lean into this more, but there's other ways that haven't been exhausted, and I encouraged Nathan to do this earlier. And I don't know that he hasn't, but he hasn't spoke to me about it since, and this was a new motion came forward. I'd like to see him exhaust other options before we consider this. So at this time, I'm not prepared to accept it. If the guest house would like my help in knocking on doors with him from some of his neighbors and saying, hey, can you give these guys a couple of spots? I'd be happy to do that. Not pressuring them, but I'd be happy to help if I can. But right now, I can't support helping them by making an exemption of this magnitude, quite frankly, on our parking lots for him. So that's my 2 cents, if it were. Councillor Ball.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking it's more of a safety issue of why they don't want their employees to travel in the middle of the night, 11 p.m., 12 p.m. Into neighboring parking lots that are much further away from the guest house than they're on camera at the back of the building. So it does look like the path of least resistance, but I also think it's the safest option for their employees coming in throughout the night.
Fair enough. I don't want to get into back and forth, but just to be clear, that's the responsibility of the employer. So they should be escorting their staff, right? It's not, again, I hate to sound cold and callous because I mean, I support the guest house shelter in every way I can, but not my monkey, not my circus, right? Everyone else is in the same boat. Every other employer downtown who's got a bag of cash that's due a deposit or whatever. So anyway, barring any new information on this one, I think we're probably ready to call the question unless there's any other comments. Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. But my offer stands. Nathan, if you're watching this, get a hold of me. I'll help you in the best of my ability to find parking spots with some of the neighbors down there. And I don't have a lot of influence down there, but I'll do what I can for you, help you out. Okay, moving on, 22.2. This is going to be Councillor McDonald's motion. This is a long-winded one. Do you want to read it or do you want me to? Would you like to read it? You've got it. Take it away, Councillor McDonald. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by somebody to get on the floor, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Prost. I will unprogram that at some point in my brain. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. I'm hoping that the whereases will clarify where I'm coming from. Whereas Canada is warming faster than the world as a whole at more than twice the global rate, and the Canadian Arctic is warming at about 3 times the global rate. And whereas nature-based climate solutions like planting trees make the most of nature's ability to combat climate change, and whereas trees beautify our surroundings, purify our air, act as sound barriers, manufactures precious oxygen, and helps us save energy through their cooling shade in the summer and their wind reduction in the winter. And whereas the Town of Midland 2023-206 strategic plan is to enhance town safety, improve citizens' comfort levels, and reduce safety concerns. And whereas the Town of Midland staff is currently undertaking a review of existing municipal bylaws, including bylaw 2019-15, being a bylaw to establish a policy for the protection and enhancement of trees, canopy, and natural vegetation within the Town of Midland. Now therefore be it resolved that the staff include revisions that will encourage preservations and planting of all trees on municipal land and private property, and ensure the trees are protected from injury and destruction. Identify guidelines to follow when working around trees, guarantee that trees are replaced when cut down, and enforce fines when trees are illegally removed. And further that this tree preservation bylaw be presented for council approval within the next 4 months. So I don't know about the rest of my council, or the rest of council, but I do know with my family and a lot of my friends, we are concerned with the global warming. Who wouldn't be, especially this winter? I know we do have a tree bylaw. I know it's being reviewed, but the purpose of introducing this notice of motion is so that we do put some serious serious preservation and protection lines in there. And the one that, when I started investigating it, Penetanguishene just approved one that has a lot more protection and preservation than ours. So I was hoping that we could seriously consider not tying everyone's hands if they want to, if they have a tree that has to come down because it's too close to the house, or they want to build a pool. But just to cut a tree because you don't want to break the leaves, to me is something, a certain dimension tree. So I'm hoping my fellow councillors will support this, so at least we get a report on how we can preserve our trees and encourage people to protect the ones we have. Thank you.
I got some comments, but I don't want to lead the pack. Is there anybody else? Okay, so I was curious about this. I read this on the agenda, I'm like, this sounds like a Brampton problem or someplace where it's like there is no urban canopy because everything's gone and they really need to, or Toronto, where they got to really make sure that trees are protected. And you see that in Toronto, where people buy the tear downs and they're building their McMansion. There's the big, tape and the fences around it to basically telling people you cut this tree down, you're paying $1 million because they need those in their communities. If you look at Midland, I mean, just drive around Midland, but pull up the Google map and, we are not suffering when it comes to tree canopy. That's not to say that that couldn't change in future years. And so I was like, okay, well, where is this coming from? How many other communities have similar bylaws in place? And as it turns out, there's a lot. And some of them are small communities like ours. Some of them are our neighbors. I was looking at Barrie's and reading the news coverage on what it originally was presented as, which was a bit more, it was a bit of an overreach, quite frankly. And then what they settled on, which seemed like, a more reasonable. It balanced property owners' rights with, the desire and want to keep canopy. And it also addressed some of the concerns about boundary trees, which is a term I never heard of until last night when I'm reading this thing. And that's where the tree, or at least the trunk, is half on your property and half on someone else's. That's, the person that has half of it can't just cut half of the tree down because, mind you, I've seen that happen, but can't just cut it. Like it becomes a thing that, there's actually a statute, which I can't remember what it's called right now. And there's litigation involved to do something like that. But if the tree's on your own private property and you decide for whatever reason, to your example, that you don't like raking leaves, God knows I got big, beautiful trees in my backyard and there's like 45 bags every fall I end up filling. I'm not looking to cut my trees down, but if I was a different kind of guy, I might say, that's my property. I pay taxes on it and I don't want to rake all these leaves. So down comes a couple of these oaks that are 100 feet tall. So where I feel we need to be careful is we need to respect property owners' rights, not make more red tape, and not get our little municipal government into telling people what they can do with their property. We already do that in lots of ways, but we shouldn't be adding even more restrictions on what people can do with their property on their land. There's all kinds of protections in place from the county about clear cutting your back 40 if you have a whole bunch of trees. Certain times a year you can do it. You have to get authorization. We even have requirements in our planning department about tree cutting because we come across those when we're trying to make approvals. So it's not like we have it's barren and we don't speak to it at all. So there's parts of this that I could get behind, no problem, because it feels good and it's not wrong. Like it's good. And we could probably look at neighboring municipalities for inspiration to adopt something. My only concern, and I'd be willing to almost pass this as it's written. I just want to get rid of the word private property. At least while we're asking staff to look into this, because I really want to be careful about, adding more government footsteps into people's property and telling them what they can do. Who are we basically to force you to put a tree back in if you cut it down? It's your property, right? Until we start paying your taxes. But the ensuring trees are protected from injury or destruction, again, that's kind of almost prescriptive. I'd like to see some of this loosened up, but this isn't the bylaw. So I'm not suggesting we start hacking away at this and change words to make me feel better about it. I'd be content to give staff and pass this and give staff the ability to come back with some recommendations based on what they see is working well in other communities. And then we as a council can sort of pick that apart and prune it, if you were, to make it fit for Midland, where it doesn't feel like a government overreach, but still accomplishes the goal of ensuring that we do have our urban forest and our canopy protected, and especially in municipally owned lands like parks, that the sanctity of trees, that as they get, parasites or get sick and we have to cut them down, that we plant something again, because it takes a long time to regrow those. You look at Little Lake Park and what we've had to cut down from the Emerald Ash borer, right? So I don't even need to remove words from this unless, council thinks we could, because this isn't going to be this isn't going to be output of the exercise. But Councillor, if you were content, I would feel better if we removed or just soften the language where it doesn't look like we're wading into telling staff that they have to come back with something that puts restrictions on private property owners. Those are just my thoughts on this. So in spirit, I'm good with this, but there's a few things that just feel like a bit of an overreach and that I couldn't support either technically now or in a bylaw without really some good rationale as to why I should.
If I could just comment on that, I would prefer not to make any changes, but I won't be offended if the report comes or the revised bylaw comes and it doesn't include everything. But I would prefer to leave private property and they can address it in the bylaw clearly. And then that's where we get to cut or, because trees, not only Toronto needs trees, everyone needs trees. They provide our oxygen. And it takes a lot of trees to combat all that traffic on Yonge Street. It's carbon. So if we can protect every tree, we're taking an extra breath. Our children are taking extra breaths, and so are our grandchildren, and in my case, great-grandchildren. So I would prefer to pass it, and I trust the staff will come forward with something that we can debate and accept eventually.
Sure. Madam CEO, did you want to weigh in? I saw the eyebrows.
Through your worship to Councillor McDonald. As I read through the last or the paragraph before the bullets, it says that staff include reversions that will, meaning that it's mandatory that we include it. I wondered if you'd be amicable to saying that may include, and then staff would have the ability to come back and determine what was reasonable.
I agree with that revision.
Thank you.
And I so move that it be that may. Please, thank you.
Thanks. And Mr. Parkinson, is there anyone else, any other staff? Because we have actually an arborist on staff now too. That's the other joy of this. So we actually have the bench strength to put something together like this, and maybe we'll be able to copy and paste from best practices elsewhere. Mr. Parkinson, do you have any comment on this, or any cautionary tales, or anything you think that would help you guys deliver what we're actually looking for out of this, given the conversation thus far?
Yes, through your worship. So as council's aware, we're coming back with a report next month on all of our bylaws. So we do have some bylaws that we do want to apply extra attention to try and update. Much like the planning report that came forward, there is a work plan that Mr. Smiley has for his team to try and review the bylaws. So we can add this to our list, and then council can, at that time when that report is received, give us direction if they're wanting us to proceed with reviewing that bylaw. As the motion is indicated, it's saying 4 months to come back. That's a pretty aggressive time to have that bylaw done, as well as other bylaws that we're looking to update as well. So perhaps the suggestion is that when we have that report come forward to council next month, that council then gives us the direction if that is a tree cutting bylaw, if that is something that they do want us to proceed with, that we can add that to our list and then proceed with it over the course of the year. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good point. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that sort of prescriptive language of having it next 4 months is a bit aggressive when you consider all the other things we're working on. And although this is important, it doesn't feel like an emergency priority that should trump other stuff. So I can't even use that word anymore. But anyway, so are you married to this 4 month thing, or amenable to removing that and letting things come back organically as staff know that we'd like to see it?
I will, I'm not married to the 4 months, but I am married to passing this bylaw and not bringing, or this notice of motion and not marrying it in with all the other bylaws being reviewed. I'd like to have this one done, and then we won't have to review it because we already know it. You can remove that from your list of all the other ones we're going to review. I would like this passed. And with the second amendment, that with no time frame, within my term, thank you. How's that fair?
Ms. Farquharson, does that seem reasonable? Can you pull this off in the next 2 years? I mean, it's not going to take 2 years, but if we remove the handcuffs of 4 months, is that a bit easier for you guys to move this through?
Well, through your worship, I just want clarification. So the report that's coming to council, it's not reviewing just our existing bylaws. It's reviewing any new bylaws that maybe we don't have. So for example, if council gives us direction for a short-term rental bylaw, then that's going to take priority that we have to dedicate resources to. So I just want to make sure that, clarification is there, that we're not just reviewing our existing bylaws. Mr. Smiley's reviewing to see if there's other bylaws and processes that he wants to bring forward for council consideration as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, because at the same time, we're also expecting Mr. Smiley to get out there and manage the couches and the junk yards and stuff that's in the community. So while this is important, I think if we do leave it a little looser, but not let it slide off to the back of the stove and forget about it, I need to make sure I know what the amendments are that we're going to make the wordsmith changes on. But that would make sense to me, because you did just utter the short-term rental bylaw and you read my mind, or maybe you listened to the CTV thing. But in order to get Matt flowing in from our short-term rentals, of which we have many in town, we need some kind of framework in place. Otherwise, they don't participate, and all of our hotelers are the only people that are collecting that for us. So that's revenue, advertising revenue for Destination Marketing Midland that we are leaving on the table. So in my mind, that would absolutely take precedent over fiddling with our tree canopy framework. As important as that is, the other one is importanter. So I like the approach Mr. Farquharson's suggesting, that he's going to bring forward the list. We can juggle the priorities. Council hasn't even decided on short-term rental. That's going to be a motion that I'm going to bring up coming at a new meeting, but I've been yapping about it for a year, so it won't be a shock to any of you. But we'll have to establish that priority list, because it is just one guy doing all this. And he's got to go out there and, get the couches and stuff, or at least lay the paper and then get the ops team to go get the couches. So anyway, are we clear on what it is we're modifying? I know there's only a couple things we're modifying on this without having to reread the whole beast. What words are we changing? Madam Clerk, have you been keeping track? Because I haven't.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe we can do the amendments in the now therefore, replace the word will with may. And then for the last paragraph, instead of within the next 4 months, within this term of council.
Okay, does that work for you,
That-
Councilor McDonald? I know it's a bit of a stretch from 4 months to 2 years.
Yeah,
But
that's fine. I can live with that, but I really urge my fellow councilors to support this, because I don't want it to we'll just have to talk about it again when it comes to all the bylaws. And he can just take this one off his list because he's already got direction on it.
All right, Councilor Meredith.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. I'm having a hard time with this one, but just the wording, private property, it's very broad right now. I know it's not the bylaw, but I'm passing something that right now that I'm not comfortable with. I do realize that, you know, we basically live in a forest. I believe the SSEA plants trees. Maybe Roberta could attest to that since she's been on the committee. They plant trees regularly every year. I'm not about to. I'd like to see Penetang's bylaw. Probably study that first before and see what that entails. But when it comes to private property, and there's got to be certain exceptions, and the cost of removing trees, thousands and thousands of dollars. So I don't think everybody's going to go out there with a chainsaw and start hacking away at trees. Yeah, they may, and then where does it go with developers? Does this have an impact on the development community? It's very broad right now, or is that separate? So, because I know they'll go in and they won't dance around trees. They'll go in and clear cut. So, will that have an effect on maybe Mr. Farquharson can voice his knowledge on that one? So Mr. Oh, are you there?
Yep. Sorry, can you
Oh.
just summarize that one more time, Councilor Meredith?
Oh,
Just kind of briefly.
sorry. Maybe I'd asked Thomas, but he's not here as well. So, sorry, I didn't see yours. You may have stepped away, but does the impact of this bylaw or proposed bylaw of a tree bylaw impact the development community of clear cutting? Not that I like them clear cutting, but I understand that for costs, you know, in a development, they'll clear cut the land, then they'll have provisions on how many trees they have to replant and so forth. So would this bylaw have impact that?
So we would need to know the details of the bylaw, but depending on the size of the property, right now, the county of Simcoe is the authority that you'd have to go through and get a tree cutting permit from. Typically, when there's a plan of subdivision that's done, they sometimes have to do tree preservation plans as well to ensure that some of the vegetation is being protected. So I think this one here, depending on what comes out of it and what the scale of we're looking to control on individual properties, it may not impact larger scale developments, maybe redevelopments of properties, maybe a severance where someone's trying to sever their lot into two. And now there's vegetation there, and now they can't cut down the trees because this bylaw is now triggering some sort of restriction. So, but typically for the larger types of subdivisions, it's the county of Simcoe that would be involved, and usually as part of those processes, they have to do environmental studies to look at natural heritage features as well. So we've got significant policies, as his worship has indicated, within our planning documents right now for natural heritage, and we're actually looking at our natural heritage designation and policies again to make sure that they are appropriate for Midland and aren't hindering development, but at the same time protecting the natural heritage.
Thank you.
So the way this is being worded now has replaced, it basically says, now therefore be it resolved that staff include revisions that may, and then there's the bulleted list. So may in that bulleted list includes private property. We could, when we get some kind of report back with options on a draft, that's where we can do the snip and trim it until we feel comfortable that it's not an overreach, but it's still accomplishing the goal, isn't hindering development, has the safeguards for the person that has a tree that just got hit by lightning or fell in their house, right? They're not going to have to get a permit to take it down, things like that. So we'll have lots of time to do that. None of that will happen if we don't pass this. It just, staff won't even look into it. And so my first, as I said, my first brush of this is like, oh my God, this is a total overreach. I can't support this. This is crazy. right? It's a development killing thing. This is meant for the big communities. But as I just Googled, like last night, I'm laying in bed at midnight. Don't ask me why. Reading the policies around about this thing, and it is actually a thing, and it's being done successfully, not killing development. Look at Barrie. They're growing like crazy. Just got a big bag of money from the province for their growth. And they have these things well executed in their community. So I think it's possible to do. We shouldn't be afraid of it, but we do need to be careful. And I think if staff, as I'm sure they will, go look at what's working well in other communities, and we'll see some kind of draft that mimics that. And then we can tweak it to midland.ca it, make ourselves feel more comfortable, or we can just say no entirely, of course. So this is just getting the ball rolling. If there's any appetite at all to look at preserving and encouraging the preservation of canopy in our community. If there isn't, then don't vote for this. If there is, well, let's see what it looks like. So that's kind of the high level summary of what we're being asked for. So are people, and sorry, the last edit was, and further, this tree preservation bylaw be prepared for council approval within this term of council. So it gives us lots of runway to get this thing done. Council, are you satisfied for me to call the question? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, that is carried. Yep. Going out on a limb here.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along. We're getting to our bylaws here. Moved by Councillor East, seconded by Councillor Bald, that the following 4 bylaws, bylaw 2024-20, establish and approve of the fees and charges for the town of Midland, and repeal bylaw 2023-8 and bylaw 2023-38. Next one's to repeal bylaw 2023-35, being a bylaw to appoint Jillian Forbes as intern building inspector. These are housekeeping amendments here. Amend bylaw 2022-32, being a bylaw to appoint a chief building official, deputy chief building official, and building inspectors. And lastly, bylaw 2024-23, regulating the use of municipal sidewalks and the establishment of temporary outdoor patios within the town of Midland. Be passed and enacted. Any questions on the 2 housekeeping ones that are in here, councils? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is passed. Moved by Councilor Meredith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Prost, that bylaw 2024-24, being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of this regular council meeting with closed session held March 20th, 2024, be passed and enacted. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And last but not least, moved by Councillor Ball, seconded by Councillor McDonald, the regular meeting of council with closed session adjourn at 9:49 p.m. All those in favor? And that is passed, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.